Welcome to the Welcome Tour. This is our third session with the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, and we are in the last section of this virtual museum, which is the Nintendo Switch 2 console inner area. We're finally diving into the system, and you will notice, for those of you who have been watching along, that we finished our previous stream with 98 medals, and we are now on 104. That's because, of course, throughout there have been some activities that we were unable to stream properly because they sometimes depended on something like a different external display or more often on the tabletop or handheld modes. And that was the case with LCD Pixel Hunt, which was actually just the handheld equivalent of the 4K game that we also had to demonstrate off-stream with a 4K display. Not demonstrate, rather, but just play and clear off-stream because we never got a chance to film this. But it's exactly the same kind of activity except showing off the resolution of the main display on the system itself, where you have some floating pixels and you just need to use the mouse to click on them very quickly. So, we don't have too many of the mini-games remaining. There are some that we were unable to do simply because we don't have the required accessories. So there's GLGR locks, there's the camera 5 faces challenge, and actually those are the only ones that are kind of equipment dependent that we were not somehow able to address immediately. And of course there are ways to call for an SOS and get the medals if you really need a medal count to do something and you don't have the peripherals, but we're not going to do that. We're going to leave them empty until such time as I actually have the equipment to experience them properly. So it's a little easier for us to keep track. So that leaves really just three things. Well, first of all, in terms of minigames, we have the inner console area, which we are just going to begin exploring in today's session. We have the highest difficulty of Dodge to Spike Balls 4, which we can now afford to unlock. This is supposedly the kind of de facto final boss of the minigame collection. Some of the NPCs have definitely talked about it that way, so we may in fact actually save it for last. And of course we have the two that we bailed on previously, which were the ones where you scrape off the stains, because honestly it was a bit of a repetitive strain injury risk to do that when we had already been kind of pushing ourselves when it came to the controller grip in mouse form in earlier minigames for several hours yesterday, so it was really not physically feasible to do these, but we might give them another go again since we're kind of well rested at the beginning of the stream. In fact, it might be a good idea to start with them and just give them another try and see if we're making any progress. If we're not making any progress and we are kind of wearing down either the Joy-Con or my table, or for that matter, my arm, then we're going to bail on it and we're just going to continue the tour. But that will basically be the agenda for today. Is we'll probably give another attempt at these. We will properly explore Area L, which has lots and lots of quizzes about the innards, the guts of the Nintendo Switch 2 console. And we will, of course, attempt the final boss, so to speak, over here with Twin UFO's Nightmare Mode. So, let's get down to business. Let's try to scrape off some paint. Again, I don't know if there's actually an efficient way to do this. Also, just as one other note, we had 5 medals off of these. I said we went from 98 to 104. The other one was off the VRR slider, which is like a little frame rate demonstration where you can manipulate different kinds of frame rate synchronizations with the system just to see how they behave all the way up to 120 FPS. But again, that's something that you have to do with the handheld display. Anyway, let's attempt the paint scraping. Again, this was a little bit hard on my arms. And yes, Green Heroes, you're saying a rumble, humble, fumble bug very much. And there was quite a lot of grumbling about it because the thing that took us the longest so far in this entire experience was find the strongest rumble 3 false positives, which took me 2 hours to do to get the second medal on the stream that we had in the last session yesterday. We did it. We got within 8, which is under the benchmark, to get within 10, but we were kind of in the 10 to 15 zone for, or rather the 11 to 15 zone for the longest time. So we did eventually figure out a pretty good method for it. But of course, executing it accurately took many, many tries. So let's try to scrape some paint. And again, if my arm feels like it's starting to fall off, we will once again bail on this. We got within about 2 seconds of it on our best attempt yesterday. And I don't know if there's actually a good method for this other than just scrubbing. It did recommend that we put on the wrist strap attachment to give ourselves better traction with the better mouse feet, and we did notice an immediate improvement on average of about 2 seconds, but we still couldn't get over the line for the second medal. So let's work quickly and efficiently and get that mess cleaned up. I've got to create lots of room on my desk so I don't knock over any drinks or anything else. So again, we're well rested. We're going to try it. Hopefully my arm doesn't feel like it's falling off, and then we'll see if we can actually do it quickly enough. I think there's no other method other than to just rub really, really quickly on a desk and hope that you don't immediately wear out your Joy-Cons after having it in hand for less than a week. Quite a gamer skill cap, you're saying, for a tech demo. Oh, in some ways, yes. You don't want to underestimate this. I mean, we're not even going for the third secret bonus medal in most of the games. They're not required for 100%. They're just kind of a way for the game to acknowledge if you're a super, super expert. And this is actually really, really difficult. It's shaking my whole table. Yeah, you see 80.66. That was actually pretty close to our best, and we still missed by quite a bit. Now, it does suggest that sometimes, you know, you can also try using something like your pants as the Joy-Con surface, so you can just kind of have the mouse tracking on your trousers or something instead. I'm seriously considering trying that if we're having some trouble scrubbing quickly enough on a desk and just having too much friction with that. So the Mario Party tactic, you're saying, of palming the stick. In that it's kind of potentially legendary for causing strain injury? Yeah, probably. Like, I know that there was this famous thing with Mario 64 where people would start getting blisters in the palms of their hands. We actually did it on the second try. Wow. We actually did it. Being well rested makes a huge difference. I can't believe it. We're on this for so long, and we made no headway with it yesterday. But again, that's because, you know, my wrist was seriously falling off. So, okay, that's optimistic. That was really quick. That was really optimistic. Let's try the other one. The other one has double the time limit. So it's 35 seconds, which is, well, times 2 plus 1, I guess. You finished that in no time flat. That was some top shelf cleaning off. Okay, so that went a lot better than expected. Because this was an absolute roadblock for us yesterday. And I just could not take more of it. So this is the one where you have to scrape off the handprint. So yeah, it does make a difference that we theoretically got our joints back in order. As you can see, we were pretty close to 50, even scrubbing very, very furiously. And so we'll see if we do better this time. Scrape the ground clean off. Okay. This is going a lot better, actually. A lot better. But we don't want to miss too many spots. And then this is getting a little bit difficult here, because you need to be a little more subtle on these, and you need to aim very well. As you can see, we're not going to hit that benchmark, I don't think. Where are we? Well, let's not give up on it just yet. We might be almost reasonably close. We actually did hit it. First try. This is a huge surprise. I thought we'd be here for a while because it went so badly in the last section. Really, really, really badly. Okay, that's fine then. That's optimistic. Let's get into the tour. I could not believe how well that went. That was the quickest I've seen. Well, I mean, you know, he's not telling you about the third medal just yet. I didn't think he'd be that good scraping. You didn't even struggle getting rid of that handprint. Okay, that wasn't expected. Green Heroes, you're saying you've noticed while watching Tanuki Dan play Mario Party 64 that the game practically required that hand-straining tactic to win against the CPUs. Yeah. This was the one that we were most worried about in terms of testing my physical limits. You see, the other ones are difficult. Find the strongest rumble, for instance. It is literally the most difficult one so far. But the thing is, it's something that you can play repeatedly without getting exhausted, right? You don't hurt yourself doing it. But there definitely have been some Nintendo activities in the past, as you're mentioning, where you're somewhat in serious danger of hurting yourself. And I feel like it's a bit of an accessibility issue if people want to grumble about that. But anyway, we are going to go back to the inner console. So once again, we're going to do the rest of the tour, and then we will save the Dodge the Spike Balls for alleged Super Boss for last. Let's see if we come to regret that. Yeah, Green Heroes with the thumbstick interaction in Mario Party 64, you're saying that it practically felt deliberate and by design. Could very well be. I mean, I've only sort of encountered it by its legendary reputation long after the fact. Because it seemed to be one of those things like blowing into NES cartridges that was just a shared rite of passage for a particular Nintendo generation, right? Where everybody kind of compared notes afterwards and they all realized that they had done the same thing and injured themselves in the same way. Alright, so we have lots of different parts to fill and lots of different quizzes. The insights are all the different informational cards. And so we'll take our time and do what we can, and there will be some additional mini games somewhere here as well. So let's, once we're down here, try to identify as many parts as we can, beginning with the bottom USB connector. And we now know, of course, that there is also the top USB connector. We'll just wander a little bit and see what we can tag. There are actually so many parts here. This is going to take a little bit of combing around, I think, because it might not be clear what we're missing, unlike things like the buttons on the surface, where it is reasonably obvious at any given points where else we should be checking. This is the micro SD Express card slot, exclusively for use with micro SD Express, which I was very careful about acquiring quickly after the Switch 2's announcement, because I knew the higher capacities would get cleaned out immediately. They're in very short supply. Anyway, you've got everything like the battery and sort of serial number here, I guess. Well, there's writing in here too. I wonder how they're going to make a minigame back on, rather a minigame based on a battery. Yeah, I'm sure they have a swell idea. So there's the left-hand speaker, and then we have a tech demo over here. I'm just trying to identify more parts first, but since we're here, we might as well take a look. Because sometimes, of course, some of the tech demos are not things I can demonstrate on stream, so it's important to find out which ones we can show. I mean, by the time you're this far, you're definitely going to be sitting on more than 6 medals, I think. Short 3D sound experience. Once again, I don't know if it's really going to come across with our sound output to our stream here, but the sound doesn't just play straight from a pair of speakers. It does some calculations to make it sound like you're really hearing it in 3D. Can be played with the console speakers or with a pair of headphones. So, yeah, because we have the sound output via HDMI to our capture card and display right now, it might not actually let me show you this, because it will detect that it's not in one of the modes where we can actually demonstrate what it's showing. You may hear sounds from places where there are no speakers. Try not to be alarmed. So, yeah, tabletop or handheld. So this one we cannot actually show right now. I will have to do it off stream. But we can read about it and have a little quiz. Yeah. The thing about the Welcome Tour, it is very much designed to show off all different modes and configurations of the console. So there are a lot of things that are either display required or handheld required or tabletop required. So, but you are meant to really pop your Switch in and out as a toy. So there are many reasons why streaming it is not really going to be a complete experience. And even if you have an off TV camera to film what is going on in tabletop mode, sometimes you would need things like 120 FPS to really capture what it's showing you. So, but we'll still give you folks a partial experience and learn about 3D audio. Oh, console speaker insights 2. So yeah, we should actually maybe do console speaker 1 first if we find it. And likely it will just be on the other side. So let's just pop everything open. Micro SD memory cards. Express, rather. And sure, let's take a look at some of this. And here's Micro SD Express, which is going to lead to all kinds of confusion with the ones that are the old style Micro SD that are branded as Extreme. But of course, like the Micro SD Express standard is all about the reading speed. It's kind of like jumping to an SSD from a hard drive. It's a handy thing to have if you run out of system memory. Now, the interesting thing is that when you do your Switch to system transfer, and you do these software redownloads, the software downloads default to being dumped on the card rather than being on the system. I actually did manually move quite a lot of software from the card to the system and to its 256 gig internal storage afterwards, because by default it tries to fill your card first. You can use microSD on a Nintendo Switch console, but only a microSD Express card will work on Switch 2, as they have warned us repeatedly. And once again, it's under the stand. And if no system memory is available, a microSD Express card could help. So let's take a look at the card. And we notice that there's a second set of pins underneath. So that's one way to tell. I actually had not really paid attention to that, so that is helpful if you're not good at reading labels. With these pins, data can be read and written in a new way. And since the original pins are there, it is backward compatible with microSD, including Nintendo Switch consoles. Just at multiple times the price until they come down a bit over the years. With microSD Express, the Switch 2 console has a new way to read and write data. And yeah, look at the visual demonstration of how much faster it is. Assuming a buffer size of 4 megs, the read speed will be about 8 times faster, yeah. Different cards will typically read and write at different speeds. Some games may be doing more in the background than just loading, which means loading speeds may not always be around 8 times faster. Reading and writing speeds are getting faster. And yeah, that's kind of true of the read speed from the internal memory too, as I understand. That it's gotten quite a boost, but I'm sure we'll read about it when we get to the relevant part. So, it only accepts a specific type of card. Now, is it going to tell us how it detects that? And yeah, it takes advantage of the higher speed. Although, it's not to say that micro SD cards are completely unusable. You still have photos and images saved on your old Switch. And then, yeah, you can still copy from it, you just can't load games from it in a live play situation. So you can still just plug it in and transfer those over. Let's like it to get hot. Now that's interesting. It's fast. Tends to get hot. And then the hardware itself is mitigating the heat buildup by the looks of it. So, I mean, it's in a very similar spot as the last one. But this time, it's near one of the air inlets to help keep it cool. On top of that... Oh, look at the heat map here. That's interesting. Yeah, because they keep the micro SD card pretty far away from the chips. We kept the micro SD express card slot farther away from other parts of the console that are likely to get hot. Yeah, that's interesting. We even applied graphite sheets to the micro SD express card slot. These sheets are very effective at transferring heat. So you can boil your battery, I guess. And then... yeah, that's sort of an interesting consideration to its placement that we hadn't thought about. I thought it was just really kind of replicating a similar placement as under the kickstand in the original Switch, but it was very specifically chosen. Let's take the quiz. And let's see what the joke answers is. That's really been the pleasure of doing the quizzes so far, is to see what the alternate answers are like when it's silly season. Okay. Greeting cards, of course. Put your little secret Valentine in there. And more pins. Yeah, I love how it's just showing you the diagram right here and asking you, are they a different physical size? And the read and write speeds, how did it compare? They are a lot faster. Again, with a diagram kind of reminding you of that in case it's not at all clear. What aspect of the memory cards do the games make full use of? Their pin's luster. And it's been designed to benefit them in what way? It slows down their read and write speeds, yeah, I mean, I guess that's one way to kind of mitigate the heat buildup as well. Yeah, Green Heroes, sometimes with some of the quizzes, they show us totally frivolous or ridiculous answers that sound plausibly like they might have been something that Nintendo already experimented with and patented somewhere. You know, you just never know when Nintendo has some of those ideas in their back pocket. There are also a lot of answers about how everything is held together by the power of love, and other such abstractions, which may also be simultaneously true. Okay, so it looks like we had kind of section 2 with the speaker over there, implying, and also with the placement on the list, that we should actually start on the left side here first. Now let's just scan a little bit more to see what we can reveal. There are just so many parts to look at, potentially. And we'll need to hunt for them all. How many parts are there? Do you know anything about a circuit board? Okay, Console Insights 1. Yeah, you're saying they assume you'd skip through the text and look more carefully at the pictures. Maybe so. Anyway, on the circuit board, there are twice as many parts as there were on the Nintendo Switch console's circuit board. The most common type of part used is the capacitor, and used to help maintain stable electrical signals. Since it exchanges them at much higher speeds, the slightest instability can cause it to stop working properly. So what did you do with the capacitors? It was use even more capacitors to ensure that electrical signals were disrupted as little as possible. So pile them in, enabling the exchange of stable high-speed electrical signals in this way. Nintendo Switch 2 can run at high speeds. This is the circuit board inside the Nintendo Switch 2 console. It might seem like it's just a single layer at first, but this single sheet is actually made up of more than 10 thin layers. Each of these thin layers contains wiring that connects one component to another. And yeah, you're asking about the screws. There have actually been quite a few informational cards up to this point about how things are held together and how screws in particular are concealed. So we might learn even more about that as we go. The wires are a bit like the human nervous system. There are thousands of these wires on the console circuit board, and each layer uses a slightly different wiring layout. We designed it as if we were trying to solve a puzzle with our hands. So yeah, this three-dimensional lattice here of interconnections. As you may already know, the circuit board has over 10 overlapping layers and thousands of wires, but wiring isn't just about connecting all the components together. Other things need to be considered too. For example, it's not possible to have wires crossing on a single layer. The wires had to be narrower than 0.1 millimeters to avoid overlap. The length of the wiring is important too. I love how it has this little finish line over there. When an electronic signal runs through a wire, it's about as fast as the speed of light. It takes a fraction of a billionth of a second. And the wires all need to be the same length, or else the signals will arrive at different times. So you have a bit of a geometric puzzle here with, as you can see, how the travel distance is sort of extended by those wave-like patterns there. So we had to make the lengths of each wire match, ensuring that the signals arrive at the same time. One more thing. We made sure that the wires are not too long, as the signals could become too weak to reach their destination. Not too close to each other, as the signals could get mixed up. Games use electricity. Yes, they do. And the Switch 2 is typically used to play games, so... I mean, even if it weren't, I think there are quite a few things about it that require electricity. Smart devices let you do much more than play games, but they consume less electricity. And the amount of electricity that a smart device needs to run for a day would be used by Nintendo Switch 2 in about 3 hours. Yeah, just with the power draw of the processor and everything else. Incidentally, more than half of this electricity is used by the main computer, which is called the SoC. Well, there you go. You've read everything that you needed to read. Let's take the quiz. Yeah, because you're talking about these screws here, right? I think this actually is the real deal. From everything we've seen of the Welcome Tours so far, they're quite accurate about depicting how everything is actually held together and where different parts are actually concealed from each other. So you're saying that on the Switch 1 they use screws with a triangular screwdriver. The outside, not cross-shaped screws like here. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, without a teardown or disassembly, we're not going to verify this ourselves. I'm sure there's quite a bit in terms of YouTube teardown content already. Okay, offer you a quiz. Yeah, because I know that even prior to the release of the Switch 2, that somebody who had surreptitiously acquired a unit in Russia or something was already trying to do a teardown to show off the system and get some clout by showing off the guts first. Because, yeah, there was some kind of leak of the circuit board somewhere in the manufacturing pipeline. Mr. Electrodude, welcome to the engineering stream. And Green Heroes, you're saying triangular screws are standard in the industry? Yeah. Okay. And yeah, it told us that the Switch 2 has a lot more capacitors. And you got 10 layers, over 10 in fact. And let's see. How fast are the signals? I mean, you would hope that they're a little faster than the top human athlete, although that kind of reminds me of, I don't know if any of you are aware of it, but there was this joke internet post back in the Usenet days in the 1990s, which was about implementing TCP/IP via carrier pigeon. And you should look that up if you haven't, because when it comes to transmission speeds, that's the all-time classic that always comes to mind. What part of the Nintendo Switch 2 console requires over half of its total power usage? You would hope it's not the microphone. Well done. And yeah, Electrodude, you should definitely look that up. It's very thorough. Although it admits that maybe implementing it by carrier pigeon might be a little bit lossy. Okay. Nintendo Switch 2 console insights for you to discover. Even more. Lie that away. And who's your associate? Let me explain. He's actually my personal assistant. He's always by my side, jotting down notes. Though, be honest, I have no idea what he's taking notes on. On the inside, he holds a blazing passion. We're conducting an inspection venue at the moment. So yeah, this character has been kind of following us around and congratulating us for taking quizzes everywhere. So there is some lore to this, apparently. And so maybe we'll encounter the assistant again. Anyway, a lot of components here that we have not had a chance to label yet. There's a lot that we have not really revealed yet when it comes to labeling everything, so I thought the world had flipped upside down. I climbed up the ladder, but it looks like I came down instead. Too strange. Yeah, because you are, of course, looking at the unit from behind. Can't believe they're showing us as much as they are. Okay, yeah, we're just running around trying to reveal the different information cards because there is one for each notable component that you're supposed to identify. I found out about its chassis became composed of magnesium alloy and plastic. Sure, let's hear about it. And Greenhouse, you just checked the screws on your 2DS, and those are some kind of odd kind of cross-shaped screw. Yeah, I had some trouble with my 3DS XL as well because one of the screws on the backplate was pretty heavily stripped, and so I ran into some trouble with it. And the thing about the 3DS XL is that if you have one of the custom patterns on it, you kind of have to be especially careful with it because even if Nintendo themselves, I don't think they're servicing those anymore, but even when they did service it, they would reputedly just replace them with a standard part if necessary. Because I have a backplate on my special edition 3DS XL from way back when that I just am unable to remove. Even though I actually have a few reasons why I would like to remove it. To, well, repair a few things. But whenever there's an electric current running through its circuit boards, wiring inside a Switch 2 console will answer that question in a moment once we acknowledge extra typo. Scrabble streamer extraordinaire. Extra typos, speaking of which, there was a recent demo of a word game that we were playing on a stream about a week ago, and that's kind of been making the rounds among various people who follow game design. And yeah, because I was trying to figure it out and metagame it from a word game perspective, because there haven't really been that many serious players who are good anagrammers on it yet, and I'm not a particularly great anagrammer. But It uses the Wordnik dictionary that Babel Royale used, and so some of that might be familiar. But it just kind of came to mind that that might be something that you'd be potentially curious about. Anyway, whenever there's an electric current running through the circuit board's wiring, there will always be an electromagnetic noise present. Descriptivist, actually, you're asking about words on stream. So one of the Scrabble people, who's one of the top-level players, developed a words on stream alternative that's called InfiniWords. I'll actually type that in chat so you can look for it. So that's the kind of hardcore words on stream that some of the Scrabble streamers run instead, and it was kind of custom built as a Twitch chat word game by one of the top level players as well. So to answer your question, do you guys get competitive at words on stream? They've graduated beyond that. An electromagnetic noise can sometimes interfere with nearby devices, which can cause them to not work properly. The electromagnetic noise doesn't easily penetrate metal, so to prevent a lot of it from escaping the console, we wrap the areas where it's emitted in metal. Take the main computer, the SoC. It's encased in metal to prevent a lot of electromagnetic noise from getting out. Okay, let's read more about it. And yeah, AstroTypo, thank you so much for dropping by with your audience again, and I hope the tournaments offline have been treating you well lately as well, and that you've been having lots of fun on and off the board. When the weather is dry and the temperature is low, you may feel a little shock when touching something metal. This is static electricity. Don't try that at home too much. Static electricity hits a game console, the console could stop working or become broken. Not a good idea. So we've employed a few ideas in places where your fingers are likely to touch metal. Yeah, because of course you have the steel of the SLSR buttons as well, on top of just the connectors. And, well, I mean the connectors would actually have a current going through them, so that's a particular issue. The game card slot and a Joy-Con 2 magnetic connectors are two such places. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see more about the redesign of the game card slot because it has changed quite a bit in terms of how they encase it. For example, we added parts to soften the impact of a sudden jolt of static electricity. Interesting. And spots that absorb it. These spots stop the static electricity from getting to parts that it might otherwise easily damage. Magnets, how do they work? It's funny that you say that after having just said that you wish-listed wordplay, because of course, Mark Brown from Game Maker's Toolkit, his previous game was called Mind Over Magnet, and it was a magnet puzzle game. So that was the previous question before the word games was magnets. How did it work? Encased with two types of material. And yeah, Green Heroes, I kind of assumed you'd be familiar with all that. So there's a particular kind of term for when people encounter that in things like fiction. I think it came mostly from people who read science fiction, where you have dialogue between people who know perfectly well what they're talking about, but they're saying it explicitly for the benefit of the reader off the page. And it's called As You Know, Bob, where that has just kind of become the standard terminology for that device, where, you know, whenever I'm talking to Green Heroes about whatever GMTK is up to, what we're doing is something called As You Know, Bob, where it's something that, you know, I know this, Green Heroes knows this, but it's for the benefit of the third-party spectator. The parts that encase the Nintendo Switch 2 are made from two types of material, tightly attached to each other. Magnesium alloy, shown in orange, and the other is plastic, shown in black. Magnesium alloy is on the inside. Strong and robust, and also reduces electromagnetic noise, and then there's the outer layer of plastic. Even when the unit gets hot, the plastic lets you touch the console without feeling the heat. We stuck these two materials together to make full use of them. The console itself is thinner than if we had made it entirely out of plastic, and there's more space on the inside too. And so that's that. Now there's also going to be the upper USB-C connector, which we're going to visit soon enough. It can be used to charge the console's battery. Yeah, it also works as an input for controllers, as we learned in the different informational cards about controllers. But then now you don't need just a special stand to elevate the Switch anymore while you're trying to plug in AC via the bottom, like you did with Switch 1. That's not all. The USB Type-C connector can also be used to connect a Switch 2 camera to the console. And yeah, so you can have the USB camera for game chat used while you're also in handheld and tabletop mode. That's how to implement that. It cannot be used to connect to the Nintendo Switch 2 dock. Yeah, because you can't just stick your Switch 2 in upside down, in spite of the fact that you can dock your Joy-Cons upside down, as we learned. It's not possible to inset the console into the dock upside down. Yeah, it is, as you can see, kind of off-center. So don't even try. There will be some kind of joke answer in the quiz about that, I'm sure. So, let's do it. You deserve a prize for all that reading. Okay, so it's wrapped in a blanket. A very comfortable blanket. When you touch the metal part of the Switch 2 console, good luck blessing the RNG gods. If only that worked for RNG manipulation. That would be one way to cheat your way through a clear check or something. The parts that encase the inside, calcium alloy, from the bones of the fallen. Which of the following can you not do with the USB Type-C connector on top? You see, as I kind of suspected, it was baiting you into trying to put your console in there upside down. You're saying you want a better prize than a quiz. What could possibly be a better prize than a quiz? It must be like a second home to you now. Yeah, we've been here for quite a while. In the short time that we've had the system. So we haven't really revealed very many components yet, but I guess we have lots of ground still left to cover. Because, as you can see in the component list, we've hardly touched any of this, but we'll get there, I'm sure, when we dig in further. Wireless communication, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, their history with wireless communication, and more. Wireless communication on Nintendo Switch 2. A few different methods are possible. Look, it's the Amiibo for NFC. Online communication via Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. I wonder if... I remember that for the Switch 1, one of the reasons why it took a long time for them to eventually patch in support for Bluetooth audio was because so many Bluetooth connections that were available were potentially taken up by up to 8 controllers, right? And that was kind of a consideration that they had to work around when it came to the Bluetooth audio support. I don't know if that changed for Switch 2. Maybe we'll learn about it. Amiibo and local communication. None of these communication methods involve cables. You don't have to worry about anything getting in the way or tangled up. wireless communication can be pretty convenient. Yeah, with my launch day Switch 1, I think the Wi-Fi antenna was clearly getting a little bit weak. It was something noticeable. But in the Switch 2 console, there are 3 antennas. And there they are. And yeah, Electrodude, you're saying you're glad you got the bundle. Like I said, it's almost as if Mario Kart World were priced to move the bundle, and they kind of assigned units accordingly. It was kind of like with the Wii U launch as well, actually, where technically there was a lower end unit with much less internal storage and which didn't come with Nintendo Land. But there were actually far fewer of those made because it was as if to send a message that, you know, if you're really crunched for dollars, okay, go for this. But you really, really, really should be buying the bundle. That's the kind of proper unit. It's more that they just wanted something else, like a different SKU to basically fit in under a certain price point, and that was the way to force it under. But you really, really, really should be buying the bundle, and they allocated units accordingly. So the 3 antennas exchange as signals with other devices. So hopefully we'll be able to reveal the information cards about these parts. And yeah, they connect everything here. That's all via Bluetooth here. And then there's Wi-Fi. And then what's more, the parts encasing the antennas have an additional function. They help the antennas work. And we'll learn more about that, I'm sure. Okay, the Wi-Fi signal used for online communication and the Bluetooth signal used for devices can get mixed up. If we don't employ extra measures to prevent this, it can result in poor communication between devices. Yeah, when you have, of course, a lot of devices on your desk as well, with a streaming setup going at the same time as well, you know, with the PC next to the Switch and everything, you do potentially get some issues with interference all over. I'll prevent this. Make sure that the signals take turns. The console can use either Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, but not both at the same time. That's interesting, given that... Well, I mean, I wonder how finely interlaced that is. Because certainly while you're having Wi-Fi connectivity while using controllers via Bluetooth, it can't be staggered by a very noticeable degree. It can switch between these two types very quickly and offsets the type of signal being used. Signals have a much lower risk of getting mixed up. I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's so rapid that you just don't notice it. Anyway, the human body and antennas. It's difficult for radio signals to pass through the human body, as we know from the Switch 1 Joy-Con connectivity, because I found that even if you're putting your knees up or something, that's even at a couch to television distance, the original Joy-Con struggled. You really just could not put your knees up or something, and it could not communicate through your legs. When a console is using Wi-Fi communication, if your hands or body are close to the antennas, it may weaken the signal. So, in case you're playing, I don't know, Everybody 1-2 Switch in a massive crowd or something like that, and you consider the positioning of the antennas to ensure your hands aren't blocking the antennas when playing in handheld mode. And let's Joy-Con 2, I'm of course holding my controllers now and trying out where we are on the grip. There are different ways to hold controllers depending on the game, so we try to distribute them evenly as best we could. And here's the Switch 2 Pro controller. And there's only one way to hold the Pro controller. Well, or so we would think. one expected hand position. The antennas were positioned based on how you would be holding the controllers. And in the past, Nintendo game consoles used cables for communication, but as time went on, there was a gradual shift to wireless technology. It used to be that you would, of course, have your old Game Boy Pokemon Link cables. Look at that. Including, of course, the Game Boy Advance Link to the GameCube for all of your Four Swords adventuring needs. Later, a special adapter enabled wireless communication for Game Boy Advance. I didn't remember that, actually, that there was something like that. And, of course, Nintendo DS, you know, that's why PictoChat was the built-in demo right out of the box, was because they were really eager to show that off. For controllers, up until Nintendo GameCube, controllers had to be connected with a cable. Oh, that's the other thing about legacy Nintendo devices, that they always seem to be about a generation behind when it comes to the 802.11 standards, where you kind of sometimes have to configure your wireless routers to accommodate them with a standard that otherwise you just wouldn't have to support anymore locally. Up until GameCube, you had to be connected with a cable, of course, until the introduction of the Wavebird. There's the Wavebird. It was very strange to pick up the Nintendo Switch Online GameCube controller that I had come in earlier this week, because I was mostly accustomed to the way the Wavebird felt with that bulk in the center and everything, and so going back to the standard GameCube controller shape was actually almost kind of unfamiliar, because I just used the Wavebird far, far more originally. And this used dedicated radio signals, hence the receiver that you needed specifically for it, and hence also the USB attachment for Switch, which was the GameCube controller adapter for Smash Brothers, if anybody actually managed to get their hands on one. And yeah, Wii Remote has been mentioned. Wii Remote is where we started getting into Bluetooth, as I well remember from trying to pair Wii Remotes with computers way back when they originally came out. A similar shift can be seen with regard to internet connections. Initially, you had the LAN cable for the GameCube, or what was it, Phantasy Star Online, and not much else. And DS and Wii used Wi-Fi. Starting from the 2000s, the number of Nintendo devices utilizing wireless communication steadily increased. I mean, pretty much everything now. Now that you've read everything, have a quiz. You were saying, Green Heroes, you know people that held their controller upside down when learning to twin stick. Oh, you mean when adapting to double analog sticks for the first time, or as in they were deliberately doing that for a particular control scheme? I mean, I thought we'd established that what they really do is scrape their palms over control sticks for Mario Party, but I guess once you get into dual sticks, people weren't doing that in quite the same context. Anyway, enough of the playing cards. Oh, if only they had brought these back with NFC, right? I feel like that's going to happen at some point. I would not put it past Nintendo to bring us back to 1889 wirelessly. 1887 or 1889? It was 1880s anyway. And the Alarmo, unfortunately, does not connect to the Switch 2, but I guess we finally got some official acknowledgement here of the Alarmo. There are 3 of these inside the Switch console. One hidden stylus everywhere in case you have somehow lost or expended some of them. Umbrellas. Yeah. Truly the catch-all device for the well-traveled secret agent. And the tidal waves are also offset, I guess, if you're baying to the moon or something. Which of the following is most difficult for signals to pass through? Well, we've had a demonstration of that. Through what medium have they communicated with each other? Sonar, well, only if you're playing Steel Diver. A telephone landline, if you want to hear the old school buzz of the modem. And like I said, IP via carrier pigeon. You're so good at communicating about Nintendo Switch 2 wireless communication. Okay, we've filled in quite a bit more now. And then, oh, it looks like we've actually filled in everything in this section. There's a lot more, though. But then, yeah, this is console speaker 2. We're going to do console speaker 1 before we do 2. That's the reason I held that off, but we will get to the appropriate point first. And just try to find our way around. This is a significantly larger section than anything we had seen up to this point. So let's try to find some steps or something that will allow us to go up. I think we need to cross over at a different point. I don't really see anywhere to ascend on this side. So we'll eventually make it through there, I think. Yeah, because we have to follow the overall course of the museum. It kind of goes above the circuit this way. Oh, you know what? I bet it's Console Speaker Insights 2, because this Console Speaker Insights 1 were actually in a previous section, weren't they? That was in the exterior. Let me take a look at that. Or was it? Dock Insights 1 and 2... Yeah, because maybe it was in this area. Yeah, because this was Insights for Console Speaker 1 was on top. So we should do Console Speaker 2. Because that follows the trajectory that we've been tracing here. Anyway, let's listen to how it describes 3D sound, since we're unable to demonstrate it for you on stream at the moment. You can enjoy 3D sound, whether it's coming from the Switch 2 console speakers or a pair of headphones. Works for Switch and Switch 2. You may even hear sound coming from places where there aren't any speakers. Listening to 3D sound with headphones connected to the Switch 2 console, they're processed to make it seem like they're coming from different directions. I haven't tried a Switch 2 with a really good headset yet. I have one sitting around. I just haven't had occasion to plug it in. And of course, when I'm streaming, I would never really have a headset being wired to the Switch. It would be after the pass-through to my capture card and the whole streaming setup, because the thing is, otherwise you don't have audio output over HDMI if the Nintendo Switch, or in this case the Switch 2, detects that it's doing sound output over the headphone jack already, right? Like basically if it outputs the headphone jack, it will not output to HDMI for sound. So kind of wish there were a setting that would allow you to do both for streaming purposes with the lowest audio latency. But if it's meant to be coming from the right side in game, you'll hear that sound in your right ear slightly sooner. And there's a slight delay before the sound comes out of the left and right sides of the headphones, yeah. So that's the directional effect. We used a dummy head microphone to simulate how the sound changes based on several factors, including how it bounces around the external ear in complex ways. And Yeah, we'll have to try to demo separately. But I'll dig out a good headset for that. I mean, the console speakers apparently are going to convey that as well, as we're learning about now. And as for 3D sound coming from the Switch 2 console speakers, it doesn't work the same way as it does with headphones. And right. In the case of speakers, you would still hear sounds from the right speaker in your left ear. And they would jumble up, making it difficult to hear. So the console speakers employ a certain trick. They cancel out the sound that reaches your opposite ear. Yeah, so you don't have interference from either source. So when sound that would reach your left ear plays from the right speaker, complex signals play along with it to cancel out that sound. Sounds from the left will only reach the left ear, and sounds from the right will only reach the right, as you can see from this pattern of emanation. So we'll definitely try it with tabletop when I have a chance after the stream. Okay, let's take the quiz. To enjoy games with 3D sound, which feature must be compatible with? Must be surround. And listen to 3D sound on the Switch 2 console. Their timings are, well, it'd be funny if they were swapped. Yeah, they're canceled out. And then... Oh, or was I thinking about... Okay, hang on. Canceling our dinner plans. Canceling our pre-orders for downloadable software. Very consumer-friendly advice. If only that feature set were also implemented. Sounds that entered the opposite ear. Yeah, no, I was probably thinking of the third thing when answering the second question. No, I totally bungled that. Yeah, no, because I was thinking about the cancellation with the pattern on the console speakers. I was not really paying attention to the question here. And then... Yeah, so this was what it was talking about instead. Let's actually pay attention to this time. Offset based on direction. Let's do this again. This is the second time over the course of this experience that we have, in fact, non-deliberately gotten something wrong. But that's okay. Nobody's keeping track. And... yeah, there we go. Canceling your software pre-orders as usual. I bet you could speak about speakers for days now. Okay, we've finished this whole section here. Let's continue and let's identify whatever else we can. Oh, there's going to be a minigame. We'll do that to break up the pace a little bit, but let's walk around first. And try to identify some more points of interest. Brightness sensor is over here. That's what it looks like on the inside. Anything else we can identify here? Yeah. Volume buttons. Yeah, because usually with any kind of the interior connections for buttons, we should be able to reveal them. Power button over there. And then, what do we have on this end? Wireless antenna, as we saw from the diagram much earlier. Now there should be somewhere while we're standing on top of the battery that reveals the card for the battery. There we go. And Eventually... Well... We'll see what else is in this zone. But let's take a look at the minigame. Fantastic, you managed to get 19 medals. Slot in the shapes, 4 shapes. So this must be another mouse rotation game. You have to fit shapes themed in the 4 suits of a pack of cards into their correct slots. Move the pieces around using mouse controls. They've been very proud of showing off the mouse rotation because it is what makes the MouseCon so different from standard mouse gameplay. Imagine if the game pulled out the actual serial number of the battery to put it on the model in that game, yeah. Okay. Just to make it extra authentic. 15 seconds is what we're going for. So yeah, once again, we need to quickly fit everything in. With good rotation. Oh, totally off. And then, yeah, we try to turn it in advance like that. Being a little bit slow here. And we just try to rotate it into place. Whoop. What was the benchmark? 15 seconds? We can do better. Okay. Yeah, I didn't think that the battery serial would have any kind of output. Like, there's no output from the battery that would provide that information necessarily. I'm wondering now if that's actually true. I'm thinking about the configuration of my laptop, for instance. Whether I can pull the battery serial from the system report itself. I feel like I actually can, but anyway. Let's try to do this a little quickly. Try to get a good angle in advance. Oh, we'll fix that later. Maybe we just fix it like that. That's still within time. It's not the secret third medal, but it's good enough. And then there will be a harder difficulty by the looks of it. And there's another minigame area as well that we haven't seen yet. So it will give us an additional difficulty. Yes, it will. On the second display. Do we slot shapes for a living? Yeah, we're shape rotators. I think we had that conversation back in Tears of the Kingdom. In one of the shrines that was all about rotating shapes to fit in slots. In part 2, the slots for each of the shapes will start to float around a bit. Okay, so you have to hit a moving target. And, yeah, Isabella, I'm glad you like the commentary. Hope it's not too unpleasant. Quickly fit the shapes into the slots. 8 to go, so we will have multiples. That looks a bit. Need to... Oh, really hit the target. Come on. Oh, well, not like that we don't. Wow. Actually really quite tricky. Okay. Bad start, but it's practice. Then this one we've got to turn. That. It keeps spawning more shapes, more than we need, right? Or, no, exactly 8. And then how far off the benchmark are we? Really way off. What do we need to beat? 30 seconds. Okay, we're about 4 seconds off. We can do that. If we didn't just, repeatedly fumble one. Are the secret medal requirements consistent with the other ones? Oh, as in, are they consistently spaced? No, not always. We know from some of the ones like Find the HD Rumble that sometimes the third medal is extremely stringent and is meant to be kind of a secret super objective, and which is why it doesn't count towards 100%. So the third medals, they do show the requirement after you've cleared 2 medals if you go back into the same game. But they don't show them initially, and again, the player isn't really kind of encouraged to feel like they have to do it for a feeling of completion. It's more of a super secret special bonus for people who dramatically excel at a game. And for some of the games, you kind of need good RNG, I think, to really get the third medal, you know, with things appearing at the right places that are very fortunate. For some of them, it's easy, though. For some of the ones, the third medal is actually pretty easy to hit. Like the multi-touch game. The third medal is just being perfect and being able to hit all 10 points with your fingers, and, you know, there is a certain amount of luck to make that happen. You need a good configuration that will allow that. Oop. We were way off that time. Very, very slow. Yeah, there will be people who try to get the third medal in everything and will eventually do it. I don't know if you saw, someone posted right before the release of the Switch 2 that they believed they were the first people ever to have video evidence of completing a particular shape balancing game or object balancing game in 1-2 Switch, because hardly anybody actually played 1-2 Switch that seriously as to master that particular minigame to the point where you would run out of timer on it. And so years later, right before Switch 2, someone posted a claim to being the first ones to display that. Yeah, this is really kind of tricky. It's very easy to be off target because, you know, yeah, you kind of have to get onto the spot and then do a last minute rotation to match. Our first attempt was still the best, despite all the fumbling then. Okay. Whoa. Wow. You see, we have to make so many attempts. Actually, you know what? It floats into place. So it's okay to just leave it. We don't need to adjust. If we kind of have the object catch it. Which we totally missed that time. Come on. So it's okay to lead it ahead a little bit if you're confident that it'll catch it. This time, of course, trying that deliberately was a total mess. We're just going to reset this one. And that was not really even worth continuing. There we go. So yeah, it did kind of click into place there. But it drifts in a pattern that isn't necessarily consistent. As you can see, the rotation sometimes suddenly changes. So it's not just going to rotate always in the same direction. So we need to account for that sometimes. Okay. There we go. Just on... no, still over 30. You feel like the shapes are deliberately drifting away. It certainly feels that way sometimes. Okay. We'll become good at this with practice, perhaps. But even really seriously fumbling one of them can compromise the run. Okay, let's fix this one first. There we go. That's under 30. So yeah, they love showing off the mouse rotation. And there's another game that's a mouse tilt game as well, where you have to tilt for a gyro input in conjunction with doing the mouse tracking as well. So, and of course, the hard mode game that we're saving for last is a dual mouse game. It's one where you have to move both at once. So yeah, there's one other minigame that we're missing in this section. I did not see where that was placed just yet. That was unbelievable. You even did it while they were moving. Yeah, so they sometimes have a sort of secret congratulatory text for achieving all 3 medals as well. That there's a little text blurb that is extra special, acknowledging just how difficult that can be. You can learn about the battery capacity and about past batteries as well, yeah. Let's do that. 1.2 times. So, interestingly enough, I wonder if anything in the software will eventually reflect hardware revisions. Because I understand that even with the standard Switch model, that it was reissued with a higher battery capacity a few years in, even before other revisions like the OLED model came out. So I'm not talking about the OLED model, I mean like the original Switch eventually had a revision about 2 or 3 years in with significant battery improvements so far as I understand. Even after optimizing the console, we needed to get it more power. If we'd used the same battery that's used in Nintendo Switch, you wouldn't be able to use the Switch 2 for very long. I haven't really stress tested the battery capacity on Switch 2 yet, myself. In terms of trying to run it down with Mario Kart to see how long it lasts. I have not done that. Other people can, but I don't have a good reason to at the moment. But it would be good to get an estimate of how long I can expect to have it up and running. So this is 5220 milliamp hours, and it has 1.2 times the capacity of the old one. Yeah, so it's about half, or about like 5/8 of something like a laptop battery, I think. Well, depending on your laptop. Increase of 1.2 times doesn't mean you'll be able to use the console for 1.2 times longer. Yeah, because of the power draw, But again, this is based on the launch date of Nintendo Switch 2, and I wonder if the software is always just going to be bound to that. And I guess the comparison is probably to the base model of Nintendo Switch 1 as well. It says 1.2 times. Because I remember that at launch, Switch 1 would get me through Breath of the Wild for about 3 to 3.5 hours. That was at launch. Obviously, the capacity declines with time. Thankfully, in my case, I don't think it declined that sharply. But I remember that was what it was like initially. We believe that video game consoles should be long-term companions. That's why we did our best to make sure it lasts a long time. It doesn't swell and blow up on you like so many other devices. And we purposely tried to ensure that the battery doesn't get too much power when it's charged. That is an optional setting when docked now, by the way, that you can have it do the 80 to 90% charge, which also a lot of laptops have started to adopt as well, and some other devices as well, where if you know that you are mostly going to be wired and mostly going to be sitting at 100% capacity anyway, it's better to prevent overcharging by stopping the charge a little under the cap. If it did, the energy output would be slightly weakened and the battery could begin to degrade. And it's easy to damage a battery with fast charging. Our focus was on how many times the console can be charged. Yeah, because I've had my Switch 1, I mean, I just retired my Switch 1 this week, right? But I've had it since the launch date of the Switch 1, and just from its longevity alone, I think it may very well be my most used electronic device of all time. Because of how intensely it has been used over the course of 8 years, year on year. Long-term companions like the Switch 1 betrayed by the Switch 2's very existence. Well, I mean, you know, the Switch 2 has quite an ambitious target to meet if it wants to exceed the lifespan of the Switch 1, for those who actually did manage to have their units all the way from launch. I mean, certainly the Switch 1's battery, for me, is in a much better state than the DS or 3DS after an equivalent amount of time. A much, much better state. In the case of the 3DS, so I think that it was in a good state on my end, and then when I left my 3DS dormant for about a year or two, when I returned to it, the battery was just gone. That's a word of advice, by the way. That's with the Switch 1, if you have units that you're storing away, it's better to drain the battery down to about 50% capacity first, instead of having it at 100% for long-term storage. Much healthier to have it at about half. Lithium-ion batteries, in particular, console battery life has been improving with successive generations. And you're saying you had to replace the 2DS battery once? Yeah, I'll need to replace my 3DS's battery. But again, I have the issue with the backplate having this screw stripped, and so I can't actually open the system without some additional assistance, I think. Might have to take it out to some toy repair or something. Anyway, yeah, look at how far we've gone in capacity. 600 milliamp hours for the Game Boy Advance SP. So we're sitting at almost 10 times that. Nintendo DS, a little more than that. Nintendo 3DS, 1300. That's for the original 3DS unit. And yeah, for the Nintendo Switch, about 4000. And hence 1.2 times what we had for Nintendo Switch. I like that it's specific about this. Game Boy and Game Boy Advance system use dry cell batteries. In those days, if you ran out of battery while playing, you had to throw away the dry cell batteries and buy new ones. Maybe one of the reasons that the original Game Boy Advance didn't even bother having a backlight. Now that you've read everything, you deserve a quiz. You could use rechargeable batteries in those. For a while, I was running rechargeables in my Wii remotes, actually. I recently grabbed a bunch of AA specifically because I have been using my Wii remotes this year. I've been going over some Wii content off stream. And so that's still one of my main use cases for AAs that would burn through them that quickly. I mean, I still have a AA in my mouse as well, but I don't use it to... Well, or rather, it has an extremely long battery life, just being what it is. And so, in terms of actually just burning through lots of AAs, the Wii Remote is the main thing. Anyway, 1.2 times. Switch consoles, battery... yeah. If only it made it lighter and smaller, you certainly wouldn't want the opposite and have massive swelling from overcharging, which is absolutely something that happens. What was used to power the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance systems? So the people who write the joke answers, as I've been pointing out so far, have this thing about mind powers, where there are lots and lots of joke answers that are about things being bound together by love and desire and pure will. Now, Steampunk Game Boy, powered by Clockwork. That would be fascinating to implement, although probably a little physically difficult to pack in to this form factor. I didn't know that some Wii remotes used AAA. I don't think I'd seen those, but I always had just the launch Wii remotes. Oh, I think much later I had the one with built-in Motion Plus that came with Skyward Sword, but for the most part I just had the launch units. And you remember games with a sun-powered backlight with the solar batteries? Yeah, like with calculators. I mean, that's what the Texas Instruments graphing calculators were really used for in a high school context, right? They were the makeshift multiple game consoles in practice. You've read a truly staggering number of insights. And sure, tell us something about the tech demos. Oh, that's a secret. You can launch a different kind of firework. We can't show this one off on stream because the HDR fireworks demo is one of the ones that also requires either a different video output, so it doesn't detect my streaming output as having HDR, or of course the main screen of the console itself, which is how we actually filled in that middle. In the super resolution demo, you can use R to toggle between images instantly. In the HD Rumble 2 motorcycle demo, you can press L or R to honk the horn. Interesting. So a lot of this we don't know. Let's give a shout out to Kozumi Kaito. We were actually just talking about the Wii Remote, and that is relevant to us here because Kozumi Kaito, I know, has been going through Metroid Prime Trilogy, which is one of the things I was using my Wii Remotes for off-stream earlier this year. And so if you want to see that as an on-stream experience, that is where to go. Because I did see him running Echoes not long ago, and he's on Prime 3 Corruption now. So to tell you the truth, I wasn't aware of these either. The staff just told me. Okay. Small m, big A, small h. I've never heard of milliampere hours in all my life, really. Well, you need to read more about batteries. Yeah, you've got the battery spec over here, as advertised. How am I enjoying the Switch 2 experience? Very much. We've spent a lot of time in the Welcome Tour. I have been starting to dabble with some Mario Kart as well, but I haven't streamed Mario Kart yet. I'm kind of saving it for after the Welcome Tour. So mostly we've just been in the free roam, playing around in the photo mode. And spending a great deal of time really just driving around and taking photos. But on stream, yeah, we've mostly been showing off the Welcome Tour. It's not all displayable on stream because there are a good number of things in the Welcome Tour that require you to pull out the system in handheld or tabletop. But we have been showing off whatever we can. And we should be on pace to finish today. We're in the last section of the console and we have one big mini game to go as well. Let's learn more about the screen. And here's the console screen insights too. I'm not sure I understand your question about a webcam. But yeah, because, I mean, you know, right now for the game chat features, it's kind of dependent on the external USB peripheral for the camera. Anyway, the Nintendo Switch 2 screen can produce very vivid colors. Although, you know, you raise a good point there, which is when they eventually have the equivalent of something like a Switch Lite for the Switch 2, when they have something like a portable-only build, it would make a certain amount of sense, depending on cost, of course, for it to have a built-in camera lens as well, given the centrality of things like game chat features to the way that the Switch 2 is being designed as a platform. I don't know if they will eventually have something like a Switch 2 Lite. I think it makes more sense, given all the backward compatibility, to just kind of continue with the Switch 1 Lite line and revise it downwards and get it cheaper and get it in other builds like the clamshell build perhaps. I think there's quite a lot of room for Nintendo to continue to proceed with the Switch 1 Lite as the entry-level portable alternative, and the Switch 2 can still mainly be this, you know, comparatively beefy, high-powered system. But I guess that depends on what the software support is going to be like several years down the road. Deep, vibrant red. There's a very thick color filter. When you use a thick filter, the resulting image will be darker. And if you compensate with brightness, the battery will drain quickly. So instead, what did they do? To keep the image from getting too dark, we made the shining dots, each pixel, as large as they could be. Huh. Yeah, look at the pixel spacing. That's what they're showing off here. We also made other customizations along these lines. And the Nintendo Switch 2 screen uses a liquid crystal display. There was some context earlier in the Welcome Tour in which we were talking about the built-in cameras on the 3DS and the stereoscopic photo feature on it. I don't remember where it came up, but it did come up at some point. Oh, because yeah, there's a section when you go to the section in the museum about the external USB camera. I think there's a particular information card that is about Nintendo's history with cameras. Much brighter and more vivid than the Nintendo Switch console screen, though. Yeah. From the little we've seen, it is a very lovely display. And then the OLED model uses an OLED system. One of our first acknowledgements of the OLED model in the tour. OLED screens are very vivid. But the Nintendo Switch 2 console's LCD screen is also quite striking. So as with other future hardware revisions, I wonder if this software will always just be bound to the launch Switch 2, because you know that in a few years' time an OLED revision of the Switch 2 is likely coming as well. I think it's a natural course for it to go. Well, it's true that the OLED model's colors are a little richer. The Switch 2 console screen can be brighter. The screen is also HDR compatible. For those who have both consoles, it might be interesting to compare them. We don't have an OLED here, so I figured I could ride out my launch day Switch 1, and we did. Although, as I was saying on one of the other streams, I think, I do regret not picking up one of the late life revisions of the 3DS, like the new 3DS XL, for instance. Where I was thinking at the time, well, we'll just ride out the system that we already have since the next platform is so close. In retrospect, I probably should have picked up a late revision of the 3DS. The number of times per second that a screen changes its image is called the refresh rate, yeah. And we know that this one shows at 120. So it's going to tell us that again. And it supports VRR, which we had to demonstrate off stream as well. But each of these features have also been fine-tuned. If it changes 120 times per second, the pictures do change incredibly quickly. I'm sure that with this little animation here, I mean, you're looking at my stream at 60, but I bet that if we pulled out into handheld, that this particular card does in fact demonstrate a 120. But you won't see that here because I only stream at 60. And we only have a current output at 60. So it also means anything that interferes with a signal, such as resistance, will have a more noticeable effect. This can ruin the image as a result. So we had to implement a few ways to reduce the amount of interference. Conversely, when there are fewer pictures changing per second, the colors gradually fade and the image gets darker. That's sort of interesting. Hadn't thought about that correlation. So we also had to find ways to ensure the colors don't fade easily. Didn't tell me too many specifics about how, though. But let's take the quiz. Okay. Which of the following is used to produce a bright red color? It would be interesting to have an apple peel, but I think that might corrode the inside. And it would also be interesting to have it output via shadow puppetry. Once again, you never know with Nintendo. I feel like this is consumer research in some ways. We're just saying, we're practically sitting on a patent for this. We're just looking for an excuse to have the shadow puppet switch. What's the term for the number of times a screen changes its image in a second? The quantum pulse. I mean, at a sufficiently low frame rate, it is rather visible as a stop animation, but there we go. Oh, wait, what did I not pay attention to? Oh, yeah, no, I said the wrong thing about the thickness of the filter, didn't I? A very thick color filter. Yeah, no, I was not paying attention. Let's actually go back. Okay. Getting a little complacent here. Whoops. Someone didn't do the reading. Anyway. Okay, let's take off this quiz. Good thing we're allowed to do a retry without having to pay a whole new admission fee. Okay, the increased screen size, the processor which lights up. Let's listen. More about the display. Yeah, it's such a noticeably larger unit. Like I said, I actually do have my Wii U gamepad on my desk as well, pretty close to my Switch 2 dock, and the Switch 2 is kind of within range of the size of the gamepad. In some ways, it kind of feels closer to the Wii U gamepad in surface area than it does to the Switch 1. It looks very, very vivid. And yeah, compared this with the 6.2-inch screen. And the 7-inch screen of the OLED model. I forgot that the OLED model increased it by that much. But of course, we never had one. It's the biggest screen of all the Nintendo consoles to date, yeah. At this resolution, I guess it must be. Makes it look even more impressive in tabletop and handheld modes. That's why they took so much care with the tabletop stand this time around. To encourage you to actually use it that way. Also easier to see when playing with others. Oh, from the viewing angle. It's actually slightly bigger than 7.9 inches. How much? Slightly. Sometimes bigger is better. Switch 2 console does have a large screen, which actually has some benefits you might not be aware of. Bigger screen, that means that the computer can do even more calculations. More calculations a computer performs, the hotter it gets. Oh, I see. So it's... yeah, saying that you've got more surface here for heat dissipation. Bigger the screen, the bigger the console. The larger the console, the less likely it is to heat up. The cooler it stays, the more calculations the computer can do. And the more calculations it can do, the more pictures and characters it can ultimately calculate. Yeah. I also went big on a laptop when it came to sizing, specifically for the thermals. So, very familiar consideration to us. I mean, it's nice to have a larger display and such too, but, you know, when you're sacrificing portability, you consider everything. And the thermals were a big part of it. If the computer can calculate lots of pictures and characters, then the images should look clear and smooth. Many characters can be moving around at once. So yeah, it's telling us don't feel too bad about the comparative lack of portability. But I feel like there is still an underserved market for a portable that is on the scale of what the DS and 3DS line provided. I feel like that's just a gap that remains unfilled. I'm glad the Switch 2 went large for our purposes, but definitely it feels like there's a bit of a vacuum where a smaller portable is supposed to be. Which I guess the Switch Lite was aiming towards, but even so, right, it didn't really go that much smaller. And being something that wasn't in a clamshell build, it, I think, was also a bit case-dependent. But anyway, the light is produced by white LEDs. Then you've got the tiny point of light. And not quite enough to service the backlight by themselves, but with the use of a translucent plate called a light guiding plate. light of an LED can be spread, there is a slight unevenness to the plate. It reflects the light in a complex, uneven way and spreads out. This way, by lining up a bunch of LEDs next to the plate, the entire screen can light up. To ensure uniform brightness of the screen, we experimented with different bumpy patterns, eventually settling on the current design. Yeah, we've done some quizzes in our time. That is very true. So, okay. 3.14 inches. You want some Nintendo Pi? Alright, so 7.9. It went big. It went really big. What can a Nintendo Switch 2 console do now that it's bigger? I mean, you know, like I said, I'm sure other things are also Nintendo prototypes. It's funny because write essays, that's essentially what people use LLMs for into computers nowadays. That's where AI went. Everybody thought that AI would eventually feel human emotions. Nope, people use it to write essays. The light that lights up the entire Nintendo Switch 2 screen starts out as what kind of light? Small dots of light from fireflies. See, when they make the Shadow Puppet analog system that you know they're cooking up deep in the Nintendo laboratories or somewhere, it probably does use the light from fireflies. I'm thinking with the projection of the LEDs, does that actually count as thin rays or small dots? I think it's small dots, right? Hang on. Yeah, no. It's LEDs, it's small dots. But I don't know why I doubted that for a second. I think I was just thinking about the diagram, but we know that LEDs are small dots. Come on. Yeah, tiny points. We know that. I don't know why I doubted that for a moment. We're slipping today. I think we were distracted by the fireflies. You're awfully knowledgeable about the screen. We are now. But there's even more about the screen. They're so proud of the display, they just want to talk about it. You want to know more? Yeah. That's the thing about this whole welcome tour package, is that it's the closest experience to actually hanging out with Nintendo's engineers, I suppose, and just listening to the hardware department talk your ear off. Because, you know, in the past, I think, on the hardware side, they haven't been terribly public and communicative in the same way that they are now. But with them leading with one of the developer interviews when the Switch 2 was revealed, and now, of course, with the welcome tour as well, I feel like there's a lot more that they want to openly talk about when it comes to how the hardware is put together and how proud they are of the very specific and granular decisions that were made along the way. It's actually a slightly different depth from the area around it. Interesting. How slight? Oh, okay, yeah, because it's kind of a little bit of scratch protection in some ways, maybe. Thickness of a piece of printer paper. But it helps prevent the screen from coming into contact with the floor or other surfaces. And that's for the screen itself. Ooh, look at that. There's the LCD, shatter-resistant film. Yeah, I think I heard that some people were unwisely trying to peel it or something. Bad idea. But it's there to protect the glass in case of shatter, of course. Screen cover, transparent plastic, 2 polarizing plates, 2 pieces of glass, a touch sensor, a light guiding plate, and LED film, and so on. With all these parts layered on top of each other, there was a risk of the screen becoming too thick. So we made a cover out of thin tempered glass. For other parts, we chose the thinnest possible ones that we could find. And designed the screen to be as thin as possible. Yeah, without much stacking, you would have to. A long, thin IC. Often on the inside of the computer, there's a component called IC, integrated circuit, typically square-shaped. This is the one that controls the console screen and touch input. Pretty thin, measuring 30 by 1 millimeters. It's to control more than 2 million dots. Yeah, I wonder if this is one of the points that we need to identify when walking around, like we did with the wireless antenna. So, yeah, it outputs 1080p and has 900 touch sensors with 3,000 wires. In order to be able to attach all the terminals connecting so many wires, the IC had to be long and thin. Okay, we read everything. I'm just looking at this, seeing where everything is put together. Lots to talk about with the screen. I'm glad we saved this section for a separate stream today. There was no way we would have gotten through it yesterday. Okay, what would you need to place on top of the Nintendo Switch 2 screen? A sheet of printer paper. Probably nothing so thick as a notepad. And the mouse pad, yeah. That's for your Joy-Con mouse. I mean, I guess if you have a second Switch 2 sitting around and you really want to scrape it up with the paint scraping game. And heart-shaped because everything here is controlled by the power of love. We know that. That's all done. Major congratulations. You're a veritable beast when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2 console screen. There's a lot more ground to cover. So yeah, we can kind of see... Maybe... I'm looking at the unit on the whole. We're kind of on the opposite side of where that would be. So... Is this section pretty much clear? I don't know if there's much more to identify. It feels like there might be something. But we need to tour the whole thing to see what we might be missing. I feel like this section might be a bit tricky to fill in. That it might be the case where something is easily missed. But we'll just have to walk around and look for more points of interest. This one, for instance. Yeah, so each of the wireless antennas can be identified. There's a third one as well. Oh, here's another game. This one I feel like is a dual mouse game. I just get that sense. But, so we'll get to that in just a moment. Let me just walk around a bit more and see what else we can tag. Yeah, lots of quizzes down here. You know what? Let's just walk this section and then... Yeah, there we go. There's something. That's the game card slot. You can see there's the red Nintendo Switch 2 game card in there. I currently don't have one of those for demonstration because we have both Welcome Tour and Mario Kart World just digitally. And yeah, so this would be the fan over here. Eventually, take a look at that as well. So many of the things I've seen here have been inspiring. I bet this quiz section is just explicitly about the fan. Here's something that identifies it. And yeah, I'm sure that's just a fan-specific quiz. We'll go back to it Let's do the minigame first. I'd like to break up the reading into quizzes a little bit. This will be the last... Oh, hang on. There's something here. Audio jack. Oh, I bet we can identify the upper USB port as well. There we go. Not sure if there's anything else to touch over here. Oh. Heatsink. Very important. Yeah, I have to remember to rotate the system because sometimes you can see some of the points of interest in ways that might not be immediately obvious. You have the Joy-Con connectors over there, for instance, but maybe they're accounted for by other parts of the tour already. But yeah, we'll have to scan around for a lot of that. Now, let's try the minigame. This will be the last new minigame for us, I think, because after that, the one that is left is just the hard mode of dodge to spike balls, which is actually the first game type that you encounter in the experience. So let's go swimming. What do they have to say about it? We don't have no clear medal as well, says you. Some minigames we only got one medal for. A second medal? Think you can pull it off? Generally, we didn't proceed until we had to. This minigame can be so satisfying when you do it just right. If it is dual mouse, I need to clear some space. But we'll look at it. 34 glittering medals. Breaststroke floaty frustration. Joy-Con L and R are equipped with mouse sensors, so yeah, this is going to be dual mouse. You can use two mice at the same time. This will be a bit of a conceptual preview of the Dragon Drive game. That was also showcased at the Switch 2 reveal. You'll be using two mice, one in each hand, and moving them to swim the breaststroke. Swim as fast as you can to reach the goal. So yeah, I definitely need a little bit of table space here. Well, see, it's extremely difficult to swim straight forward. The trick is to make large sweeping motions. That way you can propel yourself forward in bursts. Okay, this might be unique. Mice down. Let's try it. Hold the Joy-Con 2 in each hand. And, 10 seconds will be what we're going for. Okay, so we have to kind of keep straight. Oh, we have to actually submerge with it. And then sometimes we need to... Yeah, you can kind of extend them too. Because the distance seems to matter. Well, as you can see, yeah, it is difficult to keep straight. Okay. This will be good practice for the Dragon Drive game. Wow. How come we're getting so much more movement? Oh, look at that. Lucky 2 is going to pick us up here. Hang on. Maybe I need to synchronize how I'm doing this. Yeah. Sometimes we just need to do it a bit of an adjustment paddle by using one arm, I think, to straighten out. If we go straighter, we'd be able to hit 10. Yeah, it's actually surprisingly tricky to keep straight. But we just needed to be quick, and we got it. That was really fast. I see you streamlined a technique for your hand motions. Oh, and it's only one part. Yeah. But we know that the remaining game is also a dual mouse game. Just not one that has this kind of motion, which, as I said, was pretty similar to the Paralympic basketball game that they showed off that was also based on dual mouse, and which, after playing the Welcome Tour, I'm actually suddenly a lot more interested in that game, because it seems like there has been a lot of thought put into how to do something unique with the mouse controls that you can't do with a regular mouse in a regular PC context. You know why the microphone is built into the console? Maybe you're curious about the history of Nintendo's chat features. Let's do that. And that also implies, by the way, that I should have identified the microphone somewhere. Shouldn't I? I thought it was at the other side, though. Or, no, actually, with this mic, it should be up top somewhere. And where would be the input for it? You got this. Well, let's think about this. I mean, it's going to show us more about it here, so. All kinds of microphones. Yeah, so it's next to the game card slot. So I thought we would have been able to tag it here, but maybe we tagged it in a different section already. Like in the exterior of the console. It does have a built-in microphone, but you can also use a different microphone if you'd like. You can plug a microphone into the audio jack, or attach it via USB ports to the console or the dock. And plug it into the Pro Controller, if you wish. Feel free to take your pick. The chip will make your voice easy to hear. One is enough. Some devices out there that come fitted with 2 or 3. And I can pick up from a specific direction, but in TV mode, you're free to point a Nintendo Switch 2 dock in any direction you want. Yeah, because it needs to fit your shelf. You're also free to speak anywhere in the room, so it's just unidirectional, single point. You don't need a microphone specifically pointing at someone. Also, Switch 2 has a chip that makes it easier for it to pick up your voice. Customized especially for games. So it can pick up your voice loud and clear, and that's why just a single microphone will be enough. Why is the mic on the console? So you can blow into it if they ever revive Yoshi Touch and Go. We initially considered putting it somewhere else, like on a Nintendo Switch 2 dock, at the Joy-Con 2 grip, or on the Joy-Con 2. Yeah. I mean, you know, if you want game chat to be a central feature, I think on the console makes by far the most sense. Problem was, the microphone would only be usable in TV mode. It was part of the dock, and it wouldn't be usable in handheld mode if part of the grip. If we put it on a Joy-Con 2 controller, it would have made it harder for the microphone to pick up voices when you're using motion controls. Very important. So, make the mic easy to use. Well, there's a pretty natural place for it to go. Whether you're using the console in handheld mode, TV, or tabletop, and with motion controls. So you're not just shaking the mic everywhere like you would in a karaoke game. That's why we decided to build it into the console. Maximum versatility. When it comes to voice chat, Nintendo has a long-standing history. Oh, look at that. I didn't know Diamond and Pearl had voice chat, actually. Had no idea. I do remember that they had the attachment for City Folk. And the very short-lived Wii Speak. X and Y. Yeah, I had no idea about this, but I never really got that deep into Pokemon, much less any kind of multiplayer Pokemon, so I didn't realize that was implemented at all. There was, of course, the Wii U chat app. And the very convoluted system as of May 2025, they say. Because, well, smartphone apps come and go, and it was, of course, as of May 2025, that was when it was rebranded as the Nintendo app. But, okay, Tech Wolves and the Gaming Sage specifically is the one who's rated me here. Thank you so much for the raid. Let me give you a big shout out. I understand that you might have been doing some karting over on that side. Bit of a change from Ace Attorney, I suppose. So yeah, welcome. Hope everything has been fun over there. You're here to talk to me about the Switch 2's extended insides. I mean, we've been talking quite a bit about the extended insides. That's what we've been doing all stream. We've just been in the interior. People have been able to use their voices in a lot of different ways. I always felt like this whole smartphone system for Splatoon, voice chat, and Switch 1 was something that was, you know, kind of in some ways built for Japan, if you know what I mean, where there's some features like that where you kind of think that, okay, maybe this makes sense in a different local context, depending on people's use cases for their devices. I think I used it a grand total of once when they implemented this. What's more, you could even talk with people far away using the light telephone released in 1971, exclusive to Japan. This I did not know about, but you know, a lot of pre-NES Nintendo, particularly Japan exclusive pre-NES Nintendo, is definitely something that we learn about in bits and pieces. Nintendo has always striven to let you use your voice to chat. You've read everything. Okay, let's have a quiz. And yeah, the gaming stage, you're saying you finished the Grand Prix at all speeds at 3-star rank. And you've heard of a crown rank in which you have to be consistently first. Yeah, I didn't know that because all I've done in Mario Kart so far is drive around in free roam and take lots and lots of photos. I had briefly a friend lobby race as well, I think, but I'm saving the GPs for when I can actually get on stream. I heard that the mirror mode unlock is quite different this time, but I haven't looked into any of that. I don't mind if some of that is a mystery. And yeah, the welcome tour has been pretty fascinating, actually. This is already my 3rd session with it. We have put in probably about a dozen hours so far. 2 of those dozen hours were on a single minigame where you have to use the Joy-Con like a mouse and find the epicenter of the strongest HD rumble. That was very difficult, and we eventually had to come up with this kind of, you know, circle tracing triangulation method to do it properly because the metal requirement for that was very, very stringent. So it was fun to figure that out, actually. It just took a long time, and it wasn't something that I think was particularly watchable because as the viewer, of course, you can't actually feel the rumble, right? So it's been an interesting streaming experience to go through this game because there are a good number of things that can't be conveyed on stream, like some things that require you to pull out the system in handheld or tabletop, and some things that are very dependent on things like HD rumble effects. But we've been trying to convey it as best as we can, and I found it extremely worthwhile. This has been actually a great deal of fun. Okay, so all of the above work as a connection point for the microphone. Yeah, we've done all but one of the mini games that I'm able to at this point. There is one that requires the camera that we could not do, and one that requires the Pro Controller back pedals with GL and GR that we couldn't do. But we have finished everything except for one a sort of super boss mini game that we are saving for last. And when you do the quizzes, I mean, the quizzes are pretty, you know, simple and frivolous, but the joke answers are sometimes pretty funny to see when they do pop up. Okay. What would you use to chat with when using the Wii Speak accessory? Yeah, you see, like I've been saying, don't put it past Nintendo to eventually implement at least some of this. You know, I never had the Animal Crossing Wii Speak accessory, so for all I know, you have to gesticulate wildly. Yeah, no, you don't really need all the accessories. Let me show you the list. So, It helps for some of the tech demos, but I'll show you that you actually don't need very much to complete everything. So this is the tech demo list. This is the minigame list. So the tech demo list, there's one that with 3D sound that you have to demonstrate in handheld mode that we just encountered today, so we haven't done it. Some of the other ones we had to demonstrate either using a 4K or HDR display, but then for HDR or 120 FPS, you can do that with the handheld display as well. So the handheld display actually covers tons of stuff. Like I said, some of it you can't stream because you have to pull out the system, and you can't do it while you're docked. When you get into the actual accessories, there is one game that is about making faces at the camera. So you don't necessarily need the first-party Switch 2 camera, but you need some kind of USB camera. There is one series of minigames that requires the remapping of the GL and GR back paddle buttons that is either with the charged dock for the Joy-Cons or for the Pro Controller if you have one. Someday when we get a Pro Controller, and I'm really just waiting for more colors, we'll probably come back and do this. But it's kind of like a button reconfig game, so much as I can tell, where you have to kind of come up with a way to press lots of buttons at once. There are a few things, again, with the minigames where you do have to pull out the touch screen. So, for example, there's one that shows off a 10-point multi-touch that absolutely requires a touch screen. So, of course, we couldn't show that on stream either. But in terms of accessories, actually, it's just one game with the camera and one 3-part game with the GL and GR buttons. Everything else you can do out of the box with no additional accessories needed. Apart from having, you know, maybe a TV display for one demo. But like I said, even some of the things that are display dependent are almost entirely covered by the handheld. And there's also a way, if you absolutely are desperate to collect medals for things that you don't have accessories for. So, for example, if you want to hit a certain medal count for unlocking new sections, there is a cheat code that it tells you to grab the medals even if you don't have the accessories. So if you're worried about the medal count, you can do that. I don't mind leaving these unfilled because, again, if I eventually have the opportunity to come back to them, I will. So it's not actually nearly as accessory dependent as I feared, in spite of the fact that significant parts of the museum do talk about things like the Joy-Con wheel, which is not the most common accessory for people to pick up. And yeah, I'm pretty close to, minus the accessory requirement, I'm pretty close to 100%. I'm missing one minigame here, which is apparently the kind of de facto final boss minigame. And we're just kind of sweeping the last, section at this point. Whoops, I accidentally backed up to the entrance here. That's good, we'll just walk back to where we were. So yeah, it's actually a very sizable amount of content. Also, there's a lot that demonstrates the things that are unique about the mouse controls. Specifically, the fact that it can detect things like rotational states or use the mouse in conjunction with the gyro and accelerometer to create games that are not your typical kind of mouse pointer game, essentially, because they depend on a whole range of motion. So there are a lot of demos in that capacity, a lot that use the mouse control. I would say that the majority of the minigames are about showing off different things you can do with the mouse control. Okay, let's learn about the fan. Heat dissipation insights 1, so there will be multiple sections here too. Anyway, yeah, don't worry about rating and running. I mean, we've all been binging on the system if we have it, so that's totally understandable, and happy karting to you as well. I will probably do some Mario Kart on stream myself later this week. But we did want to get the welcome tour out of the way first. So anyway, some electronic devices can heat up the longer they run. They can get particularly hot when performing fast calculations, communicating rapidly, or running while being charged. Using devices that are hot to the touch definitely isn't fun. That's not the only problem. I like that it does show you the heat map here. If the parts are too hot, the device itself may fail to work properly. The parts could even break it completely. To ensure this doesn't happen, Nintendo Switch 2 cools down parts in different ways so they don't get too hot. And it does its best to keep itself from heating up with the built-in fan, and the fan funnels air into the console and blows it at different parts. I like how the diagram kind of shows you where the intake and the heatsink are. We have explored those before, of course, but then now it shows you what the airflow is actually supposed to be like. The hot air is then pushed out to keep things cool. The fan isn't always running, though. First, it uses the temperature sensor to check how hot the console is. If it's hot, the fan runs at high speed. But if it's not too hot, it'll only spin a little. Yep. The same as most fans in portable devices. And it just picks up variably. At low speeds, the fan will be so quiet you can barely hear it. Kind of wonder if it will tell us any specifics about the RPM on it. I would actually be interested to know. Air flows to the front and back. It contains a circuit board. The components on a circuit board generate heat. These need to be cooled down. To do this, air flows to both the front and back of the circuit board. So yeah, the diagrams are actually very instructive. Both sides are directly connected via the air inlets, and the fan draws in air ventilating both the front and back. And so, the components on both the front and back on the circuit board can be safely cooled. To cool the Nintendo Switch 2 console with air, the airflow needs to be as smooth as possible. With good airflow, the fan doesn't have to push itself to high speeds. Air inlets were made on the underside to let air straight in. At the outlet, the air comes straight out unobstructed. Thanks to this and the console's more powerful fan, Switch 2 provides roughly twice the airflow of Nintendo Switch. So yeah, I wonder how it will perform in the long term against things like dust contamination. Obviously, that's always a concern. But let's take a look. Okay, heat dissipation. What happens to electronic devices as they run? They get hot. They get sleepy. Well, I mean, you know, if they get hot enough to throttle or get past a certain failsafe, yes, they do get sleepy. Should the following is attached to the Nintendo Switch 2 console to cool it down? Yeah, well, of course, the ice would be in conjunction with a system that's designed with fireflies and everything else. That was already suggested by some of these answers. What is the airflow over on the Nintendo Switch 2 console circuit board to cool it down? As the diagram shows. And did we see this answer actually? It was like twice as much, right? It was something impressive. There we are. Perfect score, too cool. You obviously don't have any built-in heat dissipation because you're on fire. So, it reminds me of the old joke that I think many people here will appreciate, which is, why are you just like a fireball? Because you're downright fierce. Okay. Before I get too excited and forget, there are more heat dissipation insights to take in. So let's head over to that side. Yeah, to answer the question that you were raising earlier about the 4K requirement for the minigame tech wolves, it's only strictly required for one minigame. So there was one 4K tech demo where you see all of SMB 1 in 4K. I was actually able to do this on the 1080p screen and show it on stream in a 1080p screen. It's hard to see, but you can do it. There is one minigame that absolutely requires 4K. And the reason it requires 4K is because you need to find individual floating pixels on a 4K screen. If you don't have a 4K screen, you simply can't see it, right? So the console does need to detect that it has a 4K output in order for you to play that game. So again, as with the other ones that is hardware dependent, there is a cheat code, and specifically a Morse code cheat code, that allows you to bypass it if you really want to collect the medals without the hardware. But again, you know, the requirement for other hardware for the Welcome Tour is actually extremely minimal. So find out about parts that are sensitive to heat, how heat is transferred, and more. Yeah. Let's learn more about it. One thing about the Nintendo Switch 2 console system memory is that it's susceptible to heat. Okay, so that's where the memory is located. We'll have to remember to pass by and tag it for the stamp collection when we're in that area. System memory should be kept as cool as possible. Actually, I'm sure there'll probably be some quizzes about it as well. That's why it's been positioned close to one of the air inlets. What's more, we made sure that it wasn't near other parts that heat up. Yeah, same kind of consideration that we saw earlier with the micro SD slot, which is placed with similar considerations, which also makes me think maybe we need to go back there to that section to tag the system memory. But there's one last thing. Wiring conducts heat easily because it's made of copper. So we gave the system memory its own spot away from any wiring. This reduces the transferred heat. As a result, the system memory is protected from heat. So let me see where that was. This was... Yeah, actually, the units, we can see where it is. It's by the red and blue cables. In that side by the battery, close to where the SD card slot was. So I don't think we had tagged that. I don't know if we're able to. We'll have to go back and check it afterwards. Heat is spread evenly. Inside the Switch 2 console, it's normal for parts to get hot. Some parts are difficult to cool down with air alone. We used a couple of different materials to solve this. First being graphite sheets. And the second substance called thermal grease. Yeah, very necessary to these components together. Using these, heat is evenly distributed across the parts that get hot, so they only become a little warm. Because a lot of air gets to this warmer area, the console can be easily cooled. Graphite sheets have been attached to plastic on the back, as well as to other parts, such as the micro SD express memory card slot. Thermal grease, meanwhile, is used for the main computer. Do you know which part of the Nintendo Switch 2 console produces the most heat? The main computer, known as the SoC. Yeah, the museum is designed to slowly path your way over there. All this heat from the SoC needs somewhere to go, which is where the heat pipe comes in. So that's what it is. Carries the heat to the air outlet. The inside of the heat pipe is a vacuum. There's a little water in there too, that's interesting. The water is heated by the SoC, it turns into steam and moves towards the cooler side. And yeah, so you've got that circulation going through it. Then when it reaches the air outlet, it turns back to water and returns the SOC through a process called capillary action. Would also be a reason why, you know, for such devices, the temperature should stay within safe operating limits. This carries on over and over, transporting heat to the air outlet. This way, even the part that generates the most heat gets cooled down. I see you read it all. Okay, let's take the quiz. So what measure was implemented to prevent heat from transferring across the space marked in red? Wiring was kept away. And bacon grease. Very tasty. What heat conducting substance is used to distribute the heat? It would be funny if it were bacon grease, but I guess the bacon grease would also be part of the kind of, you know, imaginary all-organic Nintendo unit that's also powered by fireflies. What moves around inside the heat pipe? And we know that it's the water that circulates. That's a check mark. Next time I need some advice on heat dissipation, I know who to ask. Okay, so let's actually go back to see if there was something to tag by the system memory, because as we can see from the stamp collection here, that we were definitely missing some things in the early sections. Between the heatsink and a fan, for instance, I mean, you know, the things on the list are not necessarily clustered by order, but sometimes they could be. So you had the heatsink here, you had a fan here. Maybe you could actually tag the heat pipe at some point. We should walk down the heat pipe in case there is a point that we can reach that is identifiable. It's been decades since I've been in an exhibition this big. So yeah, well, we'll walk all the way down the pipe and maybe there's a tag about it. There we go. And as expected, here's the heat pipe. Yeah, in cases where you have lots of stamps, like in this section, I'm kind of glad that when you learn about the different components, then you know what parts you should actually be running around and checking. And as expected, that's where it's placed. So there's something that was before the game card slot. We know that we should have gone back to check whether we can tag the system memory, so that's something we should do. So that is kind of interesting, actually, that as you learn about this system, it assists you with points that you should be touching. So, for example, wasn't the RAM supposed to be somewhere around here, wasn't it? One of these blocks. But, yeah, because when we're going over here, and doing the circuits... Oh, no, the game card slot is already the way near the top of the list. So this is probably something close by over on that side that we haven't seen. So down here by the battery... And this area down here, maybe there's something else to fill. But we also hadn't really, I think, completely explored the central section here. And that's okay. When we eventually have to run around and get back there, we will. So let's continue to just do the progression, and then we'll see what we're potentially missing. But yeah, sometimes you need to run around quite a bit to find the appropriate stamp cards, I think. Which one was this one again? Speaker L. Yeah, eventually we'll go to speaker R and maybe we'll have a similar placement on the list. So let's just keep going. Careful how you dispose of your batteries. So previously we cleared this segment around a minigame. I don't know if there was anything else to look at on this side. Does it connect to this area where we had the heat pipe? Oh, yeah, we should actually go back to the heat pipe. It doesn't connect, so we should go back towards it to do the... It was on that side to see what it's all about. And so we'll just follow the trail all the way down. The insights here are pretty tough to wrap your head around, but the explanations are easy to follow. Yeah, that's the thing about this whole thing, is that the educational software element of this, I think, is actually pretty lucidly presented as an introduction for people who don't know a lot of basics about electronics in general, in terms of the things that go into everything from the heat management to the physical design of the whole unit, etc. So there is a lot of intro to electronics. That's sort of an element of this museum. I mean, and it is very much designed like a science museum. Which is one of the main reasons we were interested in looking at this, was just partly, not even from a game design perspective, but from a museum exhibit design perspective, and specifically with spaces that have a lot of interactives. Are you familiar with the SoC? How about CPU, GPU? Main Computer Insights 1. And even if it is introductory, we've been picking up a lot of insights about finer decisions that the engineers have been making. And look at that, from NVIDIA. It's the Nintendo Switch 2 console's main computer. System on the chip. The single chip has all sorts of capabilities. Accesses both the CPU and GPU, handles video and sound, extracts compressed data, shows images on screen, and interacts with the main memory and system memory. A very important chip. Let's hear more about it. I'm sure that with how long the heatsink strip is, that we'll probably have multiple sections of learning about the processor. Within the Switch 2 console's main computer, you have the CPU. Calculates how the characters move, switches from one scene to another. Calculates everything. So, several times faster than the CPU in the original Nintendo Switch. As people had speculated about for years in terms of what specifically the die would be. The faster the CPU is, the better it is at displaying lots of characters on screen, and performing more complex motion. As for the graphics, here's the GPU. We're performing calculations for drawing images on a screen several times faster than that of the original Nintendo Switch, as was also very heavily demanded. The faster it is, the better it is at generating more complex and detailed images. Video is purely for reference. Also, it's where machine learning and ray tracing calculations take place. So yeah, there has been, of course, a lot of speculation about the ray tracing implementation in this particular chip and what exactly it would be able to cover performance-wise. Good job reading all that. Let's do it. And yeah, this is just part one, of course, so we'll have a lot more advanced detail in future sections, I'm sure. The dog and the cat. No. We could certainly imagine what those would stand for. What part of the Nintendo Switch 2 console's main computer calculates? Yeah. No joke answer over there. So yeah, again, very much intro to electronics, but then it will develop from there. You say that the main computer is one of your main interests now. Lots more to go. What are your thoughts on super resolution and ray tracing? It's been fascinating to see processing power catch up to the possibility of real-time ray tracing within our lifetime, actually. But with the Switch 2 console's main computer, sharper and more detailed images can be produced. Super resolution, there was one demonstration of this that we had also seen. It performs machine learning calculations and predicts what kind of detailed picture it should draw. Because, yep. Inside the GPU, you also have machine learning. There are the tensor cores. Tensor cores can perform multiplication and addition incredibly quickly for the purpose of machine learning, which it is going to try to explain as concisely as possible. And yeah, because you have, of course, AI-assisted upscaling. Or you can erase everything except the people from a camera's video feed. Yeah, because that's what they would be doing to quickly isolate the image for game chat purposes. Would be using the machine learning background isolation. So, inside the GPU, we've also got ray tracing. And you got RT cores calculating where the light is going, and quick enough in real time these days, which is marvelous. Look at this kind of mock Mario platformer here. You got your clear pipe from 3D World. You have the classic 1-1 overlay. In fact, it is 1-1 with a couple of added elements, if you look at it carefully, with the initial block setup here, and also the color scheme and so on. But yeah, so this is essentially just the ray tracing demo to simulate the specularity and the reflections on the objects. But very interesting demo image for that. Let's take the quiz. Okay. Through which process does the main computer draw sharper, more detailed pictures? Alsatian, yeah. Through going on vacation, obviously. Now, what part of the GPU quickly perform that? I love how the number pi is just a part of the GPU. I don't know if you'd want to keep loose change in there, though. And what will it do for ray tracing? You can simulate the character's feelings and the company management. Depends on the company. It's an even better company now. Okay, do we get a part 3? Nope, not so. Not for the main computer. I feel like there was a lot more ground to cover with that, but that's okay. Look at this with the little Switch 2 here with the lock on it. That must be the exit for completing the tour, where you eventually see end credits. Of course, we're not going to do that until we've built in the minigame. Also, I haven't found a lost item in this section yet, but I assume we'll get there eventually. Okay, so now we're going to proceed forward. And we've got lots more quizzing to do. Once again, let's run around and see what we can identify. Oh, there's the lost item. There's the little cap down there. Dropped in a very precarious position. I don't know how we're going to get down there. I wonder how much of this is really walkable. Oh, yeah, we missed a point over there. Let's see. That looks a little difficult to reach. How do we actually climb on down? Unless we can pick it up from here. When we're within range of the question mark. No, we can't. So how do we actually traverse? So I don't see any steps going down that way. Maybe somewhere through here. Yeah, this will eventually be the exit, I'm sure. Once we have all the stamps. And then you can reach tour completion. So how do we get over to the hat? Well, first of all, let's check some of this. Here's one more wireless antenna. Do we have all three yet? We have left, right, and upper. Yeah, we do. We're just missing 2 points. We'll do the quizzes. I'm just wondering how we get down. Maybe we need to rotate a bit. Maybe there was another passage that we were supposed to follow elsewhere. Was there a way to get onto the circuit board and actually walk on it? If there is, we don't see it. It looks like it's secretly tucked away somewhere. The hat is there to tantalize you into finding the path. Oh, you know what? Yeah, no, it's actually in the introductory section. I bet that because we're on the circuit board there, that we can actually walk around under some nooks and crannies, and that's how you would approach it. So let's walk the circuit board and let's see if we can actually fit under certain passages like this. Yeah, that's exactly it. Do we actually miss an insight card on the way here? Let me check. No, that was just a quiz and a dialogue. So yeah, I bet there's something that we can look at and touch over here as well. We will run around. This is the pathway to the hat, but for some reason, ducking under these spaces in an isometric perspective reminds me of the game Tunic, where you had all kinds of hidden passages that were arranged that way. Also, you can walk around over here. We'll get to the hat eventually. I just want to see what's traversable on this side. Because, here we are. That's the passage to get to the microphone. I was wondering how you get there, because we didn't see the passage there either. So microphone is going to be the top one here, and then we need to find one more thing to stamp after that. So let's explore a bit. Can we get down on this? No, we can't. But we'll grab the hat. It's a good placement of the hat, actually, to kind of encourage you to explore this passage. So a lot of subtleties to the layout. Given that the layout is just directly modeled on the hardware itself, the fact that it's arranged in such a way that it's traversable in a logical fashion is really kind of interesting to behold. So anyway, we know that there's something after the battery on the list, but before wireless antenna left, that will be identifiable. We'll just need to figure out what that is, but I bet we just need to continue to the last section or so and find out about it there. So we almost do have all the stamps, but fill in the quizzes. Yeah, because if you're down here, we haven't been down here at all yet. It must be, oh, here it is. Speaker R, yeah, that's right. We need to look for that. So we did complete it now, but we're going to complete the quizzes as well. And where does that go? It's a secret, but we'll have to find out later. Because first, I mean, it probably takes you to end credits, but if that's the case, then we're going to do the minigame first. But let's learn about the memory. Main memory versus system memory. Two kinds of memory at play here. Main memory and the system memory. The internal storage. Oh yes, for the 256 gig internal. Yeah, actually that's what it was. It wasn't a RAM. Both types of memory read and write data. And that's why it was tucked in the area that needed cooling next to the micro SD slot as well. When it said system memory earlier, I didn't think it was referring to the actual 256 gig storage. I thought it was talking about the RAM, but of course no, not on that side of the board. It wouldn't be. But they're actually different from each other. Main memory is read from and written to faster, but the data is lost when the Nintendo Switch 2 console is powered off. So yeah, very much intro to computer architecture, which is a very valuable function to serve. It's been interesting to see how, from an educational perspective, that's been presented here. System memory has slower read and write operations, but the data is retained when the console is powered off. For that reason, the main computer uses main memory when it needs to read and write faster. It uses the system memory to store downloaded games. So, downloaded games on the console system memory are loaded into main memory before the main computer begins to read and write. Each memory type does the work it's best suited for. As for the RAM and what's it going to tell us about the capacity? So it's 3 times larger than that of the original Nintendo Switch. I actually don't even remember what the spec was for the RAM on the original Switch. I know that I had read something about with the Switch 2 that you have a certain allocation for the OS. I think it's like 9 gigs out of 12 gigs that are reserved for games or something like that. So I guess that would be 4 gigs on the original? I don't even recall. It can be used to display more character models and create larger worlds. But let's take a look. Twice as much circuitry as a Switch console. And it reads and writes twice as fast. So, main memory is up to 4 times faster. And able to perform calculations in that time. So the main memory is comparable to that of smart devices. On many smart devices, the main memory is found on top of the main computer. Well, I guess you have something like a phone that's built that compactly. When it comes to the Switch 2, the main memory is located away from the main computer. It makes it harder for the main memory to heat up and allows for additional circuitry. Designed to perform a lot of calculations. And then, what about the memory refresh? Data written to the main memory will be lost once the power is shut off. To prevent this data loss, power must be supplied repeatedly. This is called refreshing. When it comes to Switch 2, data is not easily lost. It refreshes more than 200,000 times per second. Got all that memorized? I suppose so. Okay, so we know all about the RAM, and then it is 3 times that of the original. It's too bad that it's unspecific about it, given that we do get numbers elsewhere for some of the other specs. For things like the battery capacity, for instance, earlier. It would have been nice to have more quantifiable points of comparison like that. Does not get hot easily because it's located away from the main computer. And actually, I don't remember what the refresh rate would be on the... Well, what is a reasonable refresh rate in terms of... Let's see here. I feel like I was not paying attention. Yeah, 200,000. Because I was trying to think about, like, colloquially how you would put it in terms of megahertz. Or kilohertz. For the refresh rate. But, yeah. You retained a lot about the Nintendo Switch 2 console memory. And now for the storage. And past examples of Nintendo downloadable game data and more. Let's listen. So, 256 gigs on the main system. A pretty considerable bump up from the 32 on Switch 1, but that's of course because Switch 2 is running games that in many cases will be substantially larger. And also, of course, your album collection. You have 256 gigs right out of the box, 8 times more than the system memory of Nintendo Switch, and 4 times more than the OLED model. I actually forgot that the OLED bumped that up to 64. But of course, that's not a model that I paid very close attention to since we weren't really in the market for it. Easier to add games that take up more space. Yeah, because there's quite a lot on Switch 1 that wouldn't really necessarily fit in 32 either, even back then. At least not comfortably. 256 is going to fill up quickly, though. When it comes to reading from and writing to the system memory, it works differently from the Nintendo Switch, assuming a buffer size of 4 megs. It can read and write roughly 8 times faster than its predecessor. Yeah, very similar to the improvements that we see in the SD cards as well, when it comes to read speed. And as always, it's telling you that the loading speed may not be reflective of the read speed. Same that we heard about the SD cards. Out of all the storage mediums that hold game data, it's the system memory that can be read the fastest. Hence why we did transfer some of the core software that I will use most often from the SD card onto main. Even faster than a game card or micro SD Express memory card. So yeah, for the most important software that you need quickly loaded, you want that local. Nintendo has a long history of letting you save games in the form of downloads. The Wii, I forgot that the Wii's capacity was that low. Because, I mean, I guess, you know, back then you're just grabbing things off Virtual Console plus a couple of things off WiiWare. But, yeah, it's fascinating to think about how we were just working with 500 megs back then. And here's the DSi with half that. 3DS, I had it on an SD card. I found that back then, 32 gig card was more than enough for my collection personally, although, of course, now at this point, it's not like you're downloading anything additional with all the shutdown of the eShop services and so on. Wii U came in 8 and 32, but again, as we were talking about earlier, it was Nintendo's way of saying you really shouldn't be buying the 8. Even the 32 is pretty tight. I find that I have to rotate things in and out, and we probably might need to just dedicate an external backup drive to the Wii U at some point, just so we can pull everything locally to hedge against shutdown. And yeah, Nintendo Switch, 32 on the base model, 64 on the OLED, as we've just been reminded. And let's not forget about Satellaview. 1995, saved to a... You see, it doesn't even count this in megabytes. It says 0.001 gigabytes instead of just saying 1 megabyte, which is interesting because I guess that's just as a point of comparison. I know next to nothing about the Satellaview except that it exists. There was the tribute costume that was in Super Mario Odyssey as well. But as far as Nintendo history goes, this is one of the things I don't know much about. This peripheral for the Super Famicom lets you download games via satellite. We've offered you ways to download and save games for as long as Nintendo has been a household name. I mean, I guess technically it was a household name back in the NES, but we're not going to be picky about that. Okay, let's have the quiz. Okay, how many gigabytes of system memory are we dealing with here? And we know that it's the fastest of the three. And yeah, Satellaview predates the other ones. The Disk Writer and the Nintendo Power cartridge. This I know little about. Nintendo Power I know is also the name of the magazine, but Nintendo Power cartridge. Didn't even know if that was a real thing. I guess that's what an eventual visit to the Kyoto Nintendo Museum is for. I'm so glad to see that you have a full understanding of the console storage. Let's pop over here and learn more about the OS. It's a very snappy OS. It's so noticeable as an improvement on Switch 1. Just extremely responsive. But yeah, Switch 1 was really going out of its way to minimize the OS's footprint, though. Not every piece of Nintendo Switch 2 software is a game. It comes with software that is always running in the background, and that is the OS. And yeah, I guess that's one way of explaining what the OS layer is there to do. And it's going to download software and update data while you're playing the games, find out what your friends are up to, send out notifications, and more. And the OS quietly supports games in the background. Yeah, it was interesting to think back to the Wii as the first time that we really saw an OS and launcher layer instead of just booting directly into software. That felt like such a big change at the time. And that the OS is dedicated to gaming, and that's specifically what it was made for. And so, you don't need to cover all the bases that you have on smart devices and PCs. So it's designed to be small, have a nice low memory footprint. It's designed for playing games after all, so games are naturally prioritized. And then rewriting programs, is this about patching perhaps? Inside a Wii U console, there's a Wii computer. Yeah. Oh no, this is about the backward compatibility. That's what it is. And it's going to explain how the backward compatibility is different from just having the hardware of the past console directly
embedded. This lets you play Wii games on a Wii U. And a Switch 2 console is different. You won't find a Nintendo Switch computer inside. Yeah, it's really interesting to try to see how this is taking the whole kind of explain like I'm 5 approach to establishing a lot of the fundamentals of what's going on with this console, because it's doing so in the most beginner-friendly terms it can manage without sacrificing accuracy. But this is specifically about the backward compatibility layer that we have, of course, been testing back and forth with all kinds of old software, as many people have been doing, in terms of what kind of performance bumps that we can see and what else has potentially changed. So, Nintendo Switch games won't work as they are. There's quite a bit in the hardware team interview that was released alongside the Switch reveal as well, in the Nintendo's Ask the Developers series. And they went at some length about how they were trying to get the backward compatibility together. You can still play Nintendo Switch games on Switch 2. How is this possible? When you play a Nintendo Switch game, the OS adapts it to the way the Nintendo Switch 2 console works. It does so by rewriting Nintendo Switch programs such as shader binaries on the fly. And of course, we had a little bit of required patching along the way as well, of course. But when you play a Nintendo Switch game, the Switch 2 OS is rewriting things in the background. By the way, because you're playing a Nintendo Switch game on Nintendo Switch 2, which is not using the Nintendo Switch computer, you may notice some improved performance, such as faster loading times and smoother gameplay. It's been interesting to watch the official compatibility list revise month by month as well. They just released the latest update on it, and what was notable about it was that even some software that was not maintained by the developers themselves, because they didn't have development kits yet, was just fixed up on Nintendo's end when it came to some of the issues. So, Nintendo was kind of issuing a lot of its own patching with how the compatibility layer was handling various edge cases. So, even if you had software that's no longer being maintained by the original developer over on Nintendo's end, they were able to fix up some of the compatibility layer piece by piece. There were a few items on the compatibility list that we were definitely keeping an eye on, because they were things that we might want to return to on Switch 2, but I think almost all of them have been addressed at this point. This isn't strictly related to the operating system, but there are a number of different computers inside the Switch 2 console and its accessories. The main computer is just one of them. For example, Joy-Con 2 and dock each contain their own computers. Every single game card contains a computer. Not only that, each computer has its own software that runs on it, and hence the firmware. Yeah. And because the Switch 2 console is designed for playing games, we customize each piece of firmware to make it easier to use with games. In other words, each Joy-Con 2 controller, dock, and game card runs its own custom firmware. I don't remember if the dock itself had any firmware updates that you could flash to it with Switch 1, and whether that was necessary for anything. I just can't recall. Obviously, there is a firmware updater for controllers, for the Joy-Cons, that has always been built into the system settings. Anyway, Nintendo game consoles have had their own OSs for some time, and here's the Wii, as we were talking about earlier, ever since Wii. So you're not just booting straight in Well, I guess 64 and DS also have operating systems, but then they wouldn't be user-facing, right? Like, it's included in the game software. Ah, okay, I see. Because then it's embedded in the software individually. Oh, interesting. Since release of the Wii, the OS has been installed on the console instead, and to perform all sorts of functions to improve your gameplay experience. I'm kind of curious about this in terms of what is being defined as the OS here when it comes to what was embedded in the old cartridges, because this is something that I am not totally clear on. For example, Wii Connect 24, Street Pass and Spot Pass. I was actually just saying at the pickup queue for my Switch 2 system a few days ago that in some ways, especially for, you know, big events where Nintendo people have a reason to get together in one place, that Street Pass is sorely missed. Miiverse. Miiverse is also sorely missed. There's a lot that I think has never been done as well as it was there when it came to social features, sharing, integration, etc. There's a lot that Miiverse did very, very well that has not been matched. Switching between TV mode, tabletop mode, and handheld mode on Nintendo Switch. And so on. Okay. Let's take a look at the quiz. What's the name of the software that comes installed in the background? The DS. Look, Nintendo is acknowledging the PS and the Versus. What operating system does the Switch 2 console use? The same OS used for Hanafuda playing cards. If only Hanafuda playing cards also had an operating system. But again, let's not second guess Nintendo. For all we know, it might be coming. This is the second mention that we've seen of the original Nintendo consumer product that we found today in the quizzes. So I'm glad they continue to acknowledge it. I still mainly run the Hanafuda theme as, I think, my favorite background theme on a 3DS. And of course it has that lovely effect in Mario Maker as well, with the birds. What allows Nintendo Switch 2 to play Nintendo Switch games? Actually, was that effect only in Maker 1? Anyway, I can't recall at this point. Anyway, the operating system rewriting data in the background, obviously. Unless you want to convince yourself that Switch games cannot be played on Switch 2. This would be marvelously clunky. That would be such a terrible idea. Okay. What type of software runs the Nintendo Switch 2 computer, the Joy-Con 2 controllers, and other Nintendo devices? I love how you can flash updates to your T-Ware. If only you could. Nintendo has been using game consoles with operating systems installed, so that would technically be the Wii. I mean, it would be the Wii. And then, yeah, because on cartridge would not count as an installation. Again, we want to follow up with that at some point. I don't actually know too much about the finer points of how the 64 was put together, so you completed all the quizzes. And, oh, we've got a low battery in one controller. That's not good because I want to do one of the mini games. So I'd better actually just dock this one for a moment while we page through. And the remaining minigame does require double mouse, so. Well, hopefully we'll be able to last long enough to do that, because maybe we're under battery time pressure. Okay, so it acknowledged that we completed all the quizzes. Do we get to talk to this person? Yes, we do. You read all the insights. This is truly a remarkable moment. There's a lot of technology and especially effort that you can't see just by looking at the surface. That's why we wanted to provide insight. We wanted everyone to appreciate all Nintendo Switch 2 has to offer. I hope all of this helped you gain a deeper appreciation of its workings. Thank you for having read so many insights. It really means a lot to me. Oh, now I get it. This was a direct look into the workings of Nintendo Switch 2. I wonder what this fellow who has made it all the way to this part of the museum thought we were doing all this time. They've cooked up something quirky, yet again, but quirky in a good way. The insights here sure take me back. Suddenly realized what kind of museum he was in. Okay, we're not going to hit the exit yet, because we have unfinished business. Yeah, and this one, of course, we'll need to do on tabletop 3D sound, because that would be the last demo. So we won't be able to show it. I'll do it after the stream. Okay, so where are the mini games? Okay, dodge the spike balls for... Oh, we also need to return the lost item to the information center, so let's do that. Why is it saying the inner area is still 96? Oh, yeah, no, because of that one 3D sound demo. Okay, thanks for visiting the Lost and Found desk. Surely this will be the last item. I believe that's all lost personal effects accounted for. Thank you so, so much. So, I mean, I guess with the last one, maybe not so much with the earlier ones, but the last one that was in section L was partly there to kind of lead your eye towards where you could explore. Otherwise, you know, it's not the most substantial side activity here. It's not like you build up this member of staff as a more effective member of your party or something like you can in Fire Emblem Three Houses when you return people's lost belongings. I'd like to award you the title of VIV, Very Important Visitor. How did I do to level 3 vibrate? Emily Tips, I'm going to tell you in just one moment because it took some figuring out. I was on it for 2 hours yesterday. I will explain it, but I was on it for a long time. Let's mark the map first. There, I put a sticker on your map. This is to show that we considered you a very important visitor. Now go and enjoy the rest of the exhibition. So yeah, okay, I will talk about it because we have a video as well. And it is on our Twitch channel currently, but that's temporary. It's permanently on YouTube. It's part 2 of our run-through Welcome Tour. And for Find the Strongest Rumble 3, if that's the one you're talking about, so the second medal requires 10, a distance of 10. We managed to get a distance of 8. We were stuck on it for a long time, and the best we did was kind of in the 11 or 15 zone. So the method I found was this, that when you look at the shot of where everything is placed when you fail it, you can see that the strongest rumble is kind of radial, like every point emanates the rumble in a circular pattern. And the strongest rumble emulates, rather not emulate, it emanates the biggest circle. So what you do is, sometimes you kind of need to get lucky with a good draw, but if the circle is touching one of the screen edges, and it's kind of easy to align your mouse against the screen edge and figure out where you're making contact with the edge of the circle, and you kind of divide that in half and you find where your position is along one axis. And then from experience from failing this many times, you also kind of roughly know how large the circle is in terms of its radius. I think that if you count along the markers on the side, you know that it's about 6.5 to 7 for the radius. So what you do is you count across it, and then you kind of rumble a little bit to find where the edge of the circle is. Once you find where the edge of the circle is, you try to find the center point there, and then you get the other axis.
So it still took quite a bit of work, but we got to the point where we could usually get at least one of the two axes, X or Y, absolutely dead on. And then I sometimes second guess myself and have a little bit of inaccuracy with the other one. So we were stuck kind of between 11 and 15 for the longest time. But after 2 hours of doing this, and it was by far the hardest thing, although we haven't done Dodge the Spike Balls 4 yet, we managed to do the trace. Now, I can't imagine trying to get the level 3 medal for it, but we... Theoretically, if you're kind of especially lucky with the method that I had, then maybe you could pinpoint it that precisely. We were actually very, very close to doing it. I would have gotten even closer than 8 if I hadn't also kind of second-guessed one of my positions at the last minute. But yeah, we have a method. It is on the video. I do explain it. I should probably go back to my last video and clip it because I feel like people will be asking. I should clip where I go through the explanation. Because, yeah, I feel like this is one where people will need help. For sure. And you got a good trick for Spike Balls 4. Yeah, well, we'll try it. I haven't even looked at it yet, so. 6.5 or 7 radius or diameter. You know what? I would have to look at it again. I feel like maybe I was talking about a diameter. No. I think it was the radius. I think that was the radius. But you can look at it. Like when you fail it, find the strongest rumble, you can see what the circles look like. And the strongest one is always going to be about the same size. So, anyway, so this has a lock on it because we haven't actually opened it up yet by cashing in our 99 out of 112 that we've collected so far. So let's do it. So yeah, we'll see what we can figure out about this one. So we know from previous editions of this that as long as you're not under any kind of time pressure, it's much more about just survival. If you're just trying to collect a certain number of stars. So let's see what this is before my battery and my left Joy-Con dies. You may think that everything up to part 3 has been pretty tough, but part 4 is your reality check. You might call it a spike in difficulty. Okay. Yeah, so for the HD Rumble one, yeah, you try to find a center point of the circle. The biggest circle. And so you just need to figure out where the biggest circle is roughly located, and then once you kind of get a very accurate trace by making a chord across one axis of the circle, then you can kind of find the position that you need for X or Y, and then you kind of try to isolate the other one from there. It's easier to demonstrate visually, but I can't really pull up my video from yesterday at the moment. But it is there in the link. So, all right, let's do it. Okay, double mouse, and 20 is the benchmark. It must be quite a lot of dodging if 20 is all you need for the second medal. Collect stars while controlling 2 UFOs. So yeah, it's okay, we're not under time pressure, so safety is more important than collecting everything. Maybe you just need to tuck one mouse away in the corner or something and have it hide. I don't know if that would actually be safe, like to have it hide in the corner. No, that's not going to work. I mean, occasionally we'd have to move it out of the corner, but maybe if you kind of, whoops, go super defensive with one and try to, yeah, we shouldn't collect that in overlap, obviously. Sometimes it's just not feasible. So it's important not to take too many risks here. Okay. Okay. Whoops.
the other thing you can do is just kind of keep them both together. And then you don't need to watch 2 points. Except you'd have to be pretty good at your mouse control to do it. I mean, if you really want, you could try to hold both controllers in one hand and try to track that way, but I feel like that's not the most accurate thing to do. So... So yeah, oh, you just told me in a long message what your approach was. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. You control 2 ships with the left and right, and yeah, you also thought about the idea of just having them packed together. And resync them in the corner. We might consider doing that. We'll see what to do, but I feel like keeping them together is a good idea, at least visually. Wow, it gets intense. And we were totally off. I need to keep track of which color is which, actually, so I know which hand is which if I have an issue. Yeah, because I'm kind of crossing over. That's the issue here. We don't want to cross over. We want a consistent left and right, because otherwise it's very hard to see. So even if we do keep them together, I want green to be on the right side, so we don't panic too much. Because we don't want to lose track of which hand is where. Okay. But yeah, because if you just kind of pack them together, then you can... Oh, because you can synchronize them with one hand. We may go for that. But we'll see how much we can fumble around with this first. We got up to 8 so far. Wow. Yeah, we don't want to accidentally cross hands. It's the thing that's been getting me into trouble so far. And you eventually got up to 24. That's interesting. Very impressive. So is it just the Find a Rumble 3 that you're missing then at this point? If you've clearly gotten past 99 medals already, obviously. If you've past this. In fact, you've definitely gotten past 101 already, so... Okay. Let's see. I feel like because of the way everything is coming down, that having them together with like one above the other might be better. Yeah, the problem is the angle of movement with both hands can be difficult to organize, which is why probably maybe the method of putting them together on one hand might be useful, because then you can control the angle at which you're moving them in a much more organized fashion. So let's see, I want to try out a couple of different methods first to see what we can do. Sometimes we do need to flick away a bit. Staying near the edge does potentially let you have a bit finer control over one of your positions. Oh, hang on. Our best is 9 so far. I didn't even see when we got 9, actually, because we've just been paging between attempts so quickly. Wow, totally stuffed out of there. You don't know what medal 3 was for this. Yeah, in general, you know, if I'm getting medal 3, I'm taking it, but I'm not really trying for them. That's a longer term project. And I feel like, you know, the reason that medal 3 is usually isolated and separate from the whole 100% count is that you're not really expected to get them, because sometimes you need a good randomization to get them. For instance, even if you do figure out how to get medal 3, in many cases you might not be able to do it reliably, and so... Okay. Oh, 14. That's 1 medal. That was actually not that bad. Yeah, we'll stop at 2 for this, for sure. Trying to keep them above each other and just finding a good path to weave out of here. Wow, that was risky. And the battery warning was a little distracting there. 13. Thank you so much for the follow. Yeah, I mean, this is almost certainly our last Welcome to our stream, but I Hope you enjoy the other things that we'll occasionally cover on the channel. Okay, whoops. Yeah, the dual mouse is a pretty unique scheme, 06i. Like I've been saying, a lot of this whole welcome package when it comes to the minigames has been designed to prove that the Joy-Con mouse isn't just like a mouse. They have so many minigames that specifically try to reinforce that idea. And certainly dual mouse is one of the ways they do it. But the fact that we actually just managed to get 14, you know, even just with normal play here, I think is too bad. I'm trying to keep right hand above left hand, if you'll see what I'm doing. The theory behind it is that, well, right is my dominant hand, left is going to be a little less responsive. If we keep them together in the same column, then you have a narrower area for dodging. Although occasionally, sometimes if we sort of over-dodge, we'll run into something on the side. But a little bit of luck here, of course, is what we've been doing. But yeah, the mice are surprisingly good. I had a lot of trouble actually with the paint scraping yesterday, but then I got it, well, one of them on the second try and one of them on the first try today when I went back to it. Yesterday it was more that we were so cramped from doing the HD rumble, find a rumble for so long that there was no way my hands were going to hold up to doing the paint scraping. And so today we were rested up, we were ready to scrape some paint, and so we scraped. Okay, we could be here a while, but hopefully not as long as Find a Rumble. But yeah, oh. And, whoops, nope, that's way off. I don't have the wrist strap on now. I did use the wrist strap earlier with paint scraping. And actually, because of the better traction on the mouse feet, maybe I should do it with a strap, because we found that there was a bit of an immediate improvement with how accurate my tracking was on the paint scraping when I did it there. So that might actually be a good suggestion before we run the battery out. James D, welcome. Yeah, because you get a little bit more accurate traction. You know what? I'm going to try it with the feet. Let's plug them in. The reason I hadn't really been using it was because for most purposes, I find that the straps get in my way a little bit. But it should actually improve our accuracy, so let me just get them on comfortably so the straps aren't blocking me. Then we will try again. Yeah, because there's this NPC who advises you to try it with the straps when it's the paint scraping. Yeah, because you can do more subtle movements with it now. It's less slidey. And you don't overshoot as much. You see how I'm able to make smaller movements now. And be a little bit more deliberate, so... it does feel more comfortable when it comes to something that requires this much precision. Whoops. Okay. Oh, no. One was a little too low compared to the other, so we didn't escape with both for a while. We're going to be seeing stars in our sleep by the end of this. Nope. Overshot a little bit. But we have been doing a lot better, you know, pretty consistently, at least getting near the first medal benchmark. And then a lot of it is just anticipating where the safety is going to be. Yeah, you were saying your hand was uncomfortable after Find a Rumble. Exactly, that was the case with us yesterday, because, you know, Find a Rumble kind of encourages you to have a tighter grip so you can actually feel what's going on. with greater sensitivity, and you can absolutely tense up, especially because the rumble gives you that feeling of resistance as well. Whoops. Where with Rumble shaking like crazy in Find a Rumble, you know, kind of encourages your hand to respond in kind by trying to stabilize the device before it rattles off your desk. And when you're doing that, you can definitely tense up your grip far too much. Oops. Okay, let's just try to get a really good run going here at some point. We've had some good runs so far, but yeah. I am still using my hands separately, but as you can see, keeping the UFOs together seems to be key. So, you know, at least your eyes are in one spot. We didn't have to do this with the easier mode. With the easier mode, we could just keep them apart and just track both of them separately, but now we don't want to be taking risks like that. Oh, they're too far apart. Yeah. I had lost track of which one was which for a moment. It was looking like a good run for a while. We just kind of had a little too much separation. And yeah. Nope. Got a little trapped in the corner. Yeah, your computer mouse felt massive after a lot of time with mouse controls. I use a sort of smaller size mouse as is when I'm on mouse on the PC. But yeah, definitely, you know, despite the thinness of the Joy-Con in-mouse configuration, it's more comfortable to hold than it looks. Because, you know, you can handle it pretty loosely, that's the thing. So that was surprisingly nice. Whoops. Oh, totally overshot in that one. That was such a good position, too. It was nice and safe. We had lots of room. We just completely overshot on that one stroke. So 14 is still the peak. We had 13 just now on that other good-looking attempt. So, James D, you're using two mice for these. This is a game where you have to use the left and right hand in conjunction to move both UFOs. Because I know you just came in, but the thing I was just saying about the Welcome Tour is that most of the mouse games are designed to show how Joy-Con mouse controls differ from regular mouse controls. So sometimes it's because of the dual mice, sometimes it's because you can use one mouse as a stick, like you might eventually do for Metroid Prime. Some of them are designed to show how the mice can actually detect different states with a gyro and accelerometer, so you would have things like tilt and rotation, which normally don't get tested in any mouse-based clicking game. And so a great deal of the minigames are actually designed to show that. Like I'm saying, I am actually suddenly much more interested in that Dragon Drive Paralympic basketball game after seeing some of the mouse ideas that are at work in this package. So I feel like there's quite a lot of potential in that design space that you're only really going to experience on this platform. Yeah. And yeah, you're going to head to bed, Emily Tibbs. Thank you so much for coming around, and I hope the advice about my method on Find a Rumble was somehow helpful. But I hope you've been enjoying this game, and I mean, if you've cleared as much as you have, I'm sure you've had as great a time with it as I have. And yeah, James D, this was the Welcome Tour that, when it was revealed, I think it was, you know, somewhat derided by some people as paying $10 for a manual or something. But the thing is, it was very clear to me from the way they marketed this at the outset what it was actually going to be and what the scope of it should be, and so it is very much in line with my very positive expectations. It is kind of like how... So you know how Nintendo built a museum tour audiobook for the Louvre in Paris that has actually just recently been retired because it's no longer being updated for the current revision of the exhibits. But for a great many years, it actually served as the official audio guide of the museum, such that they would issue everybody with a 3DS unit on site, and you would have the Nintendo software on it, where the physical copy of the software, which is a region unlocked cart, is one of the most valuable 3DS cartridges now, I think, in terms of collectibles. But you could also download it for your own 3DS at home if you just wanted to do a little 3D museum tour. So it's kind of like if you took that and you combined it with, if you remember, the touchscreen demos that were originally included with Super Mario 64 DS, or for that matter with New Super Mario Bros. On the DS, where they had these touchscreen demo sections that were there to basically introduce people to the concept of what you could do with stylus play before touchscreen play was really widely popularized. And it feels like it's those two concepts mashed together. The idea of Nintendo putting together a museum guide combined with Nintendo doing a control demo to show off what their hardware can offer in terms of either new forms of interaction or slightly familiar forms of interaction in the case of things like touchscreens that are given a fresh coat of paint when it comes to game design. For example, multi-touch touchscreens are not the newest thing if you're familiar with smart devices, but it's only in this package that you're going to have 10-point multi-touch being used to play Twister with your fingers. And so, conceptually, basically, the Welcome Tour is in that space of having the museum elements mashed together with the tech demo elements. And in terms of the actual content, I feel like I've certainly gotten as much out of this as I did out of something like Nintendo Land, for instance. Although, of course, Nintendo Land was on the Wii U maybe more innately appealing because of all the tie-ins to sometimes neglected Nintendo IPs. That was it. And of course the whole kind of repeatable cooperative element to it as well. And it's very easy for people to forget that Nintendo Land technically wasn't a pack-in, because it was a pack-in for the 32 gig unit that everybody was much more strongly encouraged to pick up. But it feels like we're kind of in that same design lineage when it comes to Nintendo software. And yeah, Nintendo Land was a great deal of fun, actually. I mean, not everybody, I think, was equipped to get the most out of some of the asymmetric co-op elements, but there was a good deal of solo play in there as well. I think it has to date the best entry in the much neglected Balloon Fight Balloon Trip series. But yeah, there's a lot in here that's kind of like a preview of what I bet you'll eventually have to do in Switch 2 WarioWare. Because certainly some of the minigames feel like that. Or, for that matter, in the future Mario Party. I know that currently Mario Party is mostly just revolving around the big update to Jamboree with the camera and so on, but I would not be surprised to see a much more substantially mouse-oriented one at a later stage. Okay. Yeah, I really hope we don't run the battery out here, otherwise we'll possibly have to put this one on hold. But I really did want to finish it as the last mini game that we are feasibly going to do here. Again, there were only 2 mini games that we can't do. One with the camera and one with the back paddles on the Pro Controller. But there's actually not that much that's locked away that you can't do out of the box. Whoops. But yeah, this is very much just a dual mouse showcase. How did I forget to charge my Joy-Con L? I haven't been using it that much. Thought I docked it overnight, but oh well, anyway. If we just have been playing a lot of Welcome Tour. I mean, sometimes the rumble effect is pretty high powered as well. Oh, 19! 19! We had such a clear shot at these ones in the middle, too. I just flicked the left one to the wrong place there. We had an extremely clear shot there. The path was completely clear. And we completely choked on that one. It was so available to us that time. We were absolutely going to get it on that attempt. Flubbed it from there. Yeah, because I was doing a bit of a dodge and I kind of over-dodged on my non-dominant hand. Okay. Oh, red ones are coming down. Look at 27. Alright, well we got it. We got it before the battery died. And 06i, there's a minigame where you grab Toad through a shocking maze, which was similar to one of these games. Yes, that's right. The mouse one through the electric maze, right? Okay. That actually worked out pretty well. I mean, we got far enough to see the red ball spawn. Out of curiosity, I'm going to look at what the third metal benchmark is. We are absolutely not doing it, but such elegant mouse handling. Out of curiosity, but we're not going to start it. Let's just take a look. 30. We were actually well within range of that. Okay, we're not doing it though. My battery's going to die. So let's go to the ending pretty much. Like I said, there's one thing that I need to pull out into tabletop to see before we're 100% on the tech demos, but that's easily doable. We're missing the GLGR game, and we're missing the funny faces at the camera game. And of course, you know, third metals are a bonus. Third metals don't count towards 100%, but otherwise we have done just about everything. So let's go back to the lower console area, do a little victory lap instead of just porting directly to the end, and once we're finished with a victory lap, we'll talk to the last unlock point, which I'm sure will give us some kind of ending. Well, that went really smoothly. So, as it turns out, the true final boss all along really was Find a Rumble 3. Okay. Did you get all the stamps in Area L? Yes, we did. Looks like you did. Way to go. You can head on through. The final room is just through here. Yeah, in Mario, of course, everyone knows that third metals are for 110%. Well, it's the Welcome Tour equivalent of Godmaster, right? Oh, hey, there's actually an additional interconsole area. Well, this is just a congratulatory finale area, I bet. Oh, there's actually, yeah, there are 3 more secret points But no more secret games or insights, are there? I don't think so. Just 3 more things to identify. So, well, let's take a look. What's everybody looking at over here? Oh, so you're actually in the memory now. Right, we actually did see this from up above, so it's going to show you the inside of how the RAM is encased. Which means that we should also tag the main memory, right? And then you finish at the CPU and GPU. Or the epic conclusion. We should actually talk to some NPCs since we... Well, if they have dialogue. These ones don't. Since we got all the way here. But, yeah, so, okay, so you talk to the person at the desk. That's going to be the finale. But can we tag the CPU or GPU first? Like, or rather, well, the system on a chip. Is this where you go for it? Because there's clearly a point that we need to hit for it. But do you need to talk first? No, we need to check over here. System on a chip. Here it is. This functions as the main computer. And then now we have a reason to talk to her. Did you get all the stamps? Let me check your map. Marvelous. They're all here. But it's not over yet. I have one last challenge for you. Are you ready to take on the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome to our final quiz? Okay, so this is the other final boss. Let's do it. In case you got terribly complacent about everything you've learned in a Welcome Tour up to this point. Surprise, pop quiz. What is the name of the mechanism that attaches the Joy-Con 2 controllers to the console? Can we phone a friend? Yes, we can phone a friend because this system has game chat. How many USB Type-C connectors does the Nintendo Switch 2 console have? One on top, one on the bottom. What is the name of the button on the Joy-Con R that opens game chat? It is the C button. Which of the following parts had a stamp that can be found in the Joy-Con R area? HD Rumble 2. I would be very surprised to find a Nintendo DS Rumble pack there. The mouse feet on a Joy-Con 2 strap attached to a Joy-Con 2 controller affect the controller in what way? They give it sentience. Well, I mean, the way that the mouse feet helped us in the previous minigame, they might as well have. They steal its socks. We'll know if my Joy-Cons are no longer wearing any socks. Which of the following is present on the Nintendo Switch 2 dock? There is, of course, an HDMI port. What happens when you turn on the slider for the Nintendo Switch 2 camera's privacy shutter? The lens is covered up. It's not a little gotcha machine, in case you're wondering. Nor is it going to run away from you. Which of the following parts is a stamp that can be found in the Joy-Con 2L inner area? Well, neither of these are on the left side controller. The capture button is on the left. What is located right in the middle of the Joy-Con 2 grip? Well, technically the Nintendo Switch 2 logo, I mean, that had its own point to look at. I think this actually is the answer. It was something that you could look at, and you can even see it in the picture there. I mean, it's right there. Which of the following cannot be found in the Switch 2 Pro controller? SLSR. What is the shape of the Joy-Con 2 wheel? Round? It doesn't look rectangular. Yeah, it's one per section. Which of the following is located at the very end of the Nintendo Switch 2 console inner area? Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we're here. It's the SOC. This exhibition commemorates the release of which Nintendo console? Looking at the picture, that's definitely a Nintendo Entertainment System, right? All hail the Virtual Boy. Nintendo Switch 2. Okay. We aced it. I mean, it's a little victory lap quiz. You passed the final quiz. What a success. The stamp rally is now complete. Stamp rally completed. Thanks for playing. Wonder if it gives you a screen like that for the minigames as well. It didn't give me a screen like that for filling in all insights and quizzes. But, well, I mean, this is the final quiz. So let's hit next. Maybe we see some credits. I don't know. I haven't introduced myself yet, have I? This is The Architect. Not to brag, but I actually play a fairly important role at this exhibition. I'm his curator. Nice job making it this far. This is the deepest level of the Nintendo Switch 2 console inner area. I know you've explored many different areas before winding up here, but were there any particular exhibits that left an impression on you? Can we answer that? Needless to say, these sprawling grounds are an important part of the exhibition itself. I'm so happy you explored every corner so thoroughly. Mind if I take a look at your map? Been all over the exhibition hall. Thanks for making it all the way here. I hope you will continue to enjoy the space. So yeah, that's the ending. Do we get to talk to her about anything else? Nope. So apart from finishing the last tech demo, we have finished everything that we're going to finish. At least until we have the camera to plug in and eventually a Pro Controller to play with GLGR as well. Insights are all done. And this is the completion that we have here. Yeah, so just missing the percentages for the relevant minigames. All right, that's the welcome tour. 114 medals, 114, including some of the bonus third medals that we had along the way, and of course subtracting the ones we could not acquire. Well, that was fun. And a pretty substantial experience too. I think in total I did put in about close to 15 hours on it. With a lot of talking along the way, of course. A single player's experience doing this offline and reading quickly without having to read everything out loud would probably be about half that, I would say. I wonder if there is a way to find credits, but if there is, it's not here. I'm surprised there are no credits. Because even with games like Animal Crossing that don't have endings, for instance, there's usually some way to trigger them. Oh, you know what it is? I bet it's actually at the information desk. Maybe. No, it's a quiz on the other side. It's just settings on this side, so maybe not. No. And then what about the lost and found person here? Do we have anything else? So yeah, surprisingly, we don't really have a credit sequence for this. At least none that I can see, unless there's something at the entrance area. Oh, that's just for changing the appearance. And, they'll give you a hand stamp, so even if you have invasive cosmetic surgery that completely alters your appearance, they still know that you paid for your ticket. All right, then. Let's find a good place to kind of wave farewell for this for the time being. Oh, here's Nintendo Switch 2. Yeah, let's zoom out over here. Okay, well, that's the Switch 2 welcome tour. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the experience. Like I said, obviously along the way there were some things that we were not able to demonstrate on stream, and which really nobody, I think, is able to demonstrate that well on stream. Because even with an external camera in tabletop mode, you would need 120 FPS, for instance. So there are a lot of things about this that are designed to encourage you to get your hands on a system, or the hands on the Welcome Tour yourself, if that's the kind of thing that interests you, particularly everything that you had to sit through here with watching me talk about the rumble effects without actually feeling them yourselves. I know that, ever since this game was announced, people have been fussing about whether they feel like it's worth paying for or whatever. And the thing is, if you think this kind of thing is worth paying for, you already know deep down in your heart that powers the system, according to some of the quizzes that have all the answers about how the entire Nintendo Switch 2 experience is bound together by love. Well, now we know that to be true. And so I had a very enjoyable time with this. With some of the games that we enjoyed quite a bit, maybe someday we'll push third medals on them. But again, the third medals are usually tuned to be just an extreme reward for being lucky and having a very good run through something. Some of them are a bit more accessible, and so maybe we'll look at those. Some of them I feel like we're definitely done with for the time being. But that's all for now, and later in the week, we plan to get into streaming some Mario Kart World. We'll probably be covering some things like the GPs first. Like I said, so far I've been mostly doing free roam and photo mode on my own, and also getting a couple of initial costumes unlocked. We will see after that whether we can incorporate some other things, such as any kind of racing with viewers, if there's any interest in that, because it seems like the lobby system for Mario Kart World actually is pretty convenient for setting that up, and I know I've seen a lot of streamers set that up already on their own ends. So we'll figure that out, but we're definitely going to go GPs first for that, I think, and play around with the other modes as we see fit. So Mario Kart is coming. It's coming relatively soon, but as you can see, I need to charge my Joy-Cons first. So we will do that, and we'll fill in that last little medal with the 3D audio demo stream, and I'm sure I can talk to you about that afterwards. So thank you for all of the rates that we received today. We received rates from Axter Typo, Kozumi Kaito, and The Gaming Sage. And I'm glad everybody thought to drop by and bring their audiences with them. And we're going to return the favor, or at least pass forward the favor, by sending you folks on to somewhere else very shortly. Thanks for watching. VODs are on YouTube. I need to remember to clip my explanation of what I did with Finder Rumble 3. But apart from all that, enjoy everything you may be playing this week, be it on a Switch 2 or on the Switch 1, if you're still on that. And have fun with everything you may be experiencing in whatever way. See you at our next destination, and as always, fare thee well.